Hello and welcome to our game here on this fine Monday morning. Yeah, we've got the tunes going already, probably looking like a couple of old fogies doing something like that. But it's been a huge weekend of football brought to you by OurGameSupporters.com. If you want these jerseys, maybe this Dublin one, maybe that Derry one after a couple of big weekends for the two counties, go to OurGameSupporters.com. There's a huge supply of jerseys there from all the different counties. Use the promo code OurGame and you get 15% off. We've got Conor Gilligan coming on, former Derry footballer, later on just to talk about that victory over Donegal. There's an awful lot happening over this weekend. But I couldn't help but think, Michael, that in a weekend where we had the Champions League final and all the provincial finals, you end up talking about stuff that's not to do with the matches themselves. Like the Champions League final, all the talk is about the crowd issues. And I start thinking now with all the crowd invasions we've had after games recently in soccer. You know, think of the Crystal Palace one when Patrick Vieira drew a boot at a supporter who was obviously getting a bit cheeky. There was one just over the weekend where I'm not sure where it was, maybe France, where a load of them came in with flares. We've seen Plan B and GEA.
Yeah, that Tailteann one is frightening, Shane. The final whistle blows and you can see people running on and you just see all the players like literally sprinting to the dugouts. And it was, they started firing flares and everything in the direction of the players. Just really, really worrying stuff there. And then, obviously, as you said, in France the other night at the Champions League, that was just mad what happened. Like, literally, the talk is all about the hours beforehand and the hours after. I think Jim Beglin tweeted about, like, basically that after there was just organised gangs, like, waiting outside to mug people and things like that. Just crazy scenarios that you're not talking about the on-field action after what was an unbelievable kind of sporting weekend.
Yeah, and it's the same even in the Leinster and Munster finals in football. You're talking more about structures than you're actually talking about the games themselves. And, you know, you don't want to throw cold water all over the achievements of the teams that have won. So, obviously, Galway, Kildare, Kerry and Derry have claimed provincial title wins over the weekend.
No, you said Kildare there. They definitely haven't claimed the provincial.
Oh, God, I don't have time. Sorry, I had the scoreline.
I know Derry had a Monday morning, like, but...
Look, hands held up on that one. Obviously, Dublin won that game 5-17 to 1-15. But you end up talking about these structural issues that you're supposed to be talking about in the depths of winter when there's very little going on. But, I mean, that's just kind of the way it panned out the weekend. Now, you and I both saw some of the Tailteann Cup action, and the draw is coming, I think, around 25-9 this morning. So we'll talk about that as it happens. But some of those games are really tight and interesting. And there's also a little bit of I suppose it might sound a little bit harsh, but a weeding out process in terms of the teams that aren't going that well. And as the Tailteann Cup gets closer to obviously the quarterfinals are up next, semi-finals, finals, maybe it'll have more of that Joe McDonough vibe where all of a sudden you've got really competitive, good quality games going on and it becomes an excellent competition.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think over the weekend that we had, given that there was a lot of one-sided games, well, there was really one-sided provincial finals and then two competitive finals yesterday. The Tailteann Cup probably got more of an airing over the weekend than it would have had if we'd had 3 to 4 really good provincial finals. It's funny the way it worked out. The Tailteann Cup got more airing because of the lopsided nature of the provincial championship. That's just the way it was over the weekend. But yeah, really competitive games. I was just chatting to the Wicklow joint manager, Gary Duffy, after they were beaten by Offaly yesterday. A couple of injuries kind of coming into the game. But I just asked him about, like, you know, buying into the Tailteann Cup. Was it a hard sell to players? And he just said, this is the level that we're at, so there's no choice but to buy into it. That was the feeling around the group. If we want to go higher, we have to be performing here first. If it's pushed properly and marketed properly, it could be a very good competition. But that's the level that they're at, and he has no issue with that whatsoever. And then, like he was saying, you know, it'd be great to get a Tyrone in the qualifiers, or great to get whoever and get a good crowd down to October. But realistically, we're not going to win the game. So this is the level that we're at. If we want to get to that next level, we have to go and earn it. So I think it's been generally really well received by managers and players. I don't think there's been maybe outside of maybe Down, who have just been going poorly anyway. There hasn't been mass exodus from squads or anything like that. They've generally held on to most of the players. I think Offaly lost one player. There's been one or two. I think Gary Duffy said there's been a couple around the Wicklow panel as well, but maybe more extended panel members. So if the managers are selling it hard, the GA are trying to sell it hard, the players will generally buy in, and there are carrots there for them. The semi-finals are obviously televised. There's an all-star system as well. So guys that maybe you're not going to hear of at national level too much have a chance to shine. I think most of them are kind of taking that on board, in fairness to them. And we, tight, interesting games over the weekend. That Sligo London game was a belter of a game. Obviously a big win for Leitrim as well, beating Antrim. Even Offaly, whose season could have totally nosedived, they had an opportunity to turn it around, and they have. So definitely offers opportunities for those teams that are operating outside the top two tiers.
Yeah, John Mahon was very much in favour of the Tailteann Cup. He said as much after the game. Niall Carew of the Carlow manager, they beat Tipperary. And after the game, he was like, he was delighted that they'd won it. But he also a couple of times said they needed this. As in, the players really, really needed this. Who knows, for belief or whatever it might be. And then I see at the other end of the spectrum, a team that got knocked out, like you'd mentioned, Leitrim getting a fine win over Antrim, 2-14 to 112. Enda McGinley steps down after the game. I just wonder sometimes, and I'm not picking out Enda, we've had him on the show before. He's absolutely brilliant football mind. Do you think sometimes a manager almost knows before a game, or sometimes midway through a season, they decide, and I'm not talking about Enda, that, this is probably going to be my last game, and he's almost going into a match thinking, if we lose today, I'm probably finished up here?
Well, have you ever been around a squad, even as a player, where you can get that vibe off a manager, or not that they're necessarily checked out, but and I'm obviously not talking about Antrim in this case, but maybe where maybe the players aren't buying what you're selling anymore, and there's a bit of an edge to training, and maybe lads aren't that happy, and you can kind of. I was involved in the management team one time where I literally could not wait for the season to be over. I just knew for whatever reason it just wasn't working as we had planned. Didn't feel was getting the buy-in, or we were getting the buy-in, and you're kind of willing towards the end, and I literally could not wait until the season was over. That was just the way it was, and I'm sure that's the case with some inter-county players, with management teams, and I'm sure it's the case with management teams as well, where it's just maybe not going as you had planned. From an Antrim point of view, I know they would have been very disappointed. They were promoted from Division 4 last year, retained Division 3 status at different stages in that Division 3 campaign, could have been promoted had it not been for, a loss here or a bad result there, and then just disappointed against Cavan. And, they were chasing their tail nearly from the off against a Leitrim side who hit the ground running. And in fairness to Andy Moore and the lads there, they were missing. I think Ryan O'Rourke was missing over the weekend as well, and they still pulled a big win out there on home soil. I think Donal Wren was very good around the middle of the park. And obviously Keith Byrne, I saw he got a couple of really good scores in the highlights last night as well. But it does offer some teams the opportunity, like you said, Niall Carew there. Did you see that? Like, did you hear the hooping and hollering behind him? You could hear like the noise belting out of their dressing room. That's exactly what it meant to them. And you mentioned last week about the red shorts. I can't get my head around these red shorts. I think they look a bit mad, and they do look a bit like the skirts for the camogie. But that's probably to some extent not saved like Niall's reign in Carlow, but that has given them some boost going into the next round, regardless of how things go. And I know from my own playing career with Offaly, like where big wins were few and far between, and you remember the big win, that'll be a win that the Carlow boys will be talking about for a good while. So that's the benefits of a competition like that for a team like that.
Yeah, and I'd hope that because we've mentioned it a few times, that Carlow people don't think we're picking on their team, but the shorts do look a little bit odd, and let's move away from them. I think that would be best for all concerned.
Yeah, someone said I saw someone on Twitter, they were saying I really, when looking at the Carlow shorts, I'm really looking for a nice lolly. Remember the I can't think of what was the one with the 5 or 6 colours?
I know the one you're talking about. I can't think of the name either. Somebody will surely know the name of that ice cream. It was like
a nice one. It was
just a solid ice one, wasn't it? I think it was. Anyway, we'll talk about some of the comments here. Grodogo Grakon. Surely the past weekend proves that rejecting Proposal B at Special Congress and insisting on maintaining the provincial structure of the championship was ludicrous. Dublin have now won 17 of the last 18 Leinster titles. Kerry 11 of the last 13 Munster titles, mainly by double digits. Yes, Derry and Famine was great, but there's a broader picture. So let's talk first of all about the Connacht Senior Football Championship final. Galway 2-19, Roscommon 2-16, and a goal at the end probably took a small bit of the bad look off it for Roscommon. It was a great finish by Diarmuid Murtagh, who'd done something similar in the Connacht final. The Division 2 League final. I was there for that at Croke Park a couple of months ago. But this is a big win for Pádraig Joyce because he hadn't secured silverware just yet as Galway manager. And also, they would have been the first Galway team to lose 4 provincial finals in a row in its 112-year history if they had to lose this game. So the pressure was on.
Yeah, you don't like they're the sort of records you definitely want to be avoiding anyway. You don't want to be making those type of records. But like, I think it's funny when Joyce took over that initial couple of rounds of the league before COVID hit. It was real free flowing football, real gung ho attacking football, and then when they came back. Some people are saying, I think I saw a tweet last night saying Galway were flying until COVID hit them hard. It's just like COVID hit every county. COVID hit every county hard. But when they came back from COVID, Mayo absolutely obliterated them in that league game. There was a bit of a kind of an identity crisis. I think Pádraig Joyce was probably struggling with the idea of this is the football I'd like to play, and the football that you actually can play at inter-county level. Like, it's such a fine balance between wanting to play this free-flowing style, but also being really solid at the back. And at various stages yesterday, they had 15 men behind the ball. When they caused a turnover, though, they were gone, breaking up the field. There was a couple of 5-on-3s and 4-on-3s when they won the ball. And crucially, up top, like, they have 3 lads that can really hurt you. I would have seen Rob Finnerty at Sigerson level. It was at the Maynooth game earlier on this year. Just an absolute wand of a left foot. I think he kicked 5 from play yesterday. Comer is injury free, looks back to his best. We've always known he's a scorer and can put his head down kind of like a bull, but he's also a great provider as well. And Shane Walsh was able to get on the ball at times and just have that little bit of space or create that space through this sidestep. As Eamon Fitzmaurice said last night, when Shane Walsh is slowing down, there's something special coming. It's either, a shot or this mad sidestep to create space for himself. But in those 3 guys, they have 3 lethal weapons. Now, you won't get the 3 of them firing on a given day. But even if you have 2 of them playing to a decent level, they're giving themselves a chance. And then at the other end, barring that last 10 or 15 minutes, they looked an awful lot more, they conceded 2-16, but they had been solid generally throughout. So Joyce has kind of found that balance. Are they All-Ireland contenders? Probably not yet. No, they're not. Yeah. But they're just below, they're probably a bit below Kerry, Dublin, potentially Derry. They're at a similar level, I'd say, to Derry as Division 2 form would suggest. But yeah, it was a big win for them, and badly probably needed for Joyce. There would have been question marks and murmurings in the off season about what sort of style are they trying to play? Is the camp happy? And that just puts all that to bed. And it's taken a while. This is his 3rd season now, but he's exactly kind of where he wants to be now, building. They've got a lot of their best players back as well. Like, you look at Killy McDade has a few years inter-county under his belt now. Like, looks a real inter-county player. He was always going to be, but it just takes a bit of time. Paul Conroy was, quiet at stages yesterday, and I thought Ultan Harney did a pretty good job of him, but he was still able to contribute, and they still had other players that were able to get the job done for them on the day. So yeah, a huge win for Galway.
Yeah, Rob Finnerty's a player I really like. Interviewed him a couple of years ago. You check that out on the OurGame YouTube page there. Now, he's really good quality footballer, languid style almost, just a real stylist Galway type footballer. And I know I just said I'm ruling him out of the All-Ireland title race, but it's funny, sometimes when other teams take a step back, on certain years, a traditional county can kind of come in and have the confidence to go and win an All-Ireland. But look, my number 1 is Dublin at the moment. I think they're starting to show some of the form of old. We'll talk about Kerry later on and their provincial final win. But as you're talking about full forward lines and Shane Walsh, Damien Comer and Rob Finnerty, I mean, throw that up against Con O'Callaghan, Dean Rock and Cormac Costello, who scored 310 between them at the weekend as well. You've 2 fair full forward lines there, and then you've got the Kerry one. I mean, take your pick. Do you want to put in Gainey, Clifford, Killian Spillane, or what way do you want to arrange these Kerry forwards? There are some serious forward lines out there at the moment.
Yeah, and listen, isn't it a great luxury? Like, we've probably both been involved in various teams and even been on the line in teams where you might have one really good player up top, but to have three up top, and even to see Dublin the other night, there was always somebody in at the edge. There was always somebody giving them that out ball. Sometimes it was Costello. I think for Con's goal, it was Costello, and he gave the ball off to Con. Other times it was Con. Other times it was Rock. It is a nice luxury to have, and if you have two or three lads that are really dangerous inside, you're trying to build a smart game plan around them playing to their strengths and trying to make sure there's a couple in around the house the whole time. But yeah, those are the guys that are, those are the guys that are going to win you the game. So that's what you need. That's why, Derry would have Shane McGuigan and a couple more, but probably don't maybe have that kind of same arsenal as a Kerry or a Dublin. Galway are probably still behind those two yet, but they probably still have a bit more attack and firepower. But then you look at Derry and you think, just how solid are they at the back? Like in Rogers and McCaig in particular. Like, McCaig hardly gave Paddy McBrearty a kick at it yesterday. Rogers was able to put Michael Murphy on the back foot. I thought that was a bizarre one in extra time, how Murphy was still kind of tracking him almost. That they were really playing to Derry's strengths there. But yeah, as you say, if you have those couple of really, really potent lads inside, it's some weapon to have in your arsenal.
Yeah, and I suppose something like, normally we ask a question, we get the answer. It's a fruit pastilles lolly, but Richard Hogan and Gerard Hogan has pointed out. John Hennessy talks about the Wibbly Wobbly Wonder ice cream. They were a great job. So I didn't remember the Bigfoot thing. It was sort of like a little chocolate.
Yeah.
It was basically
chocolate
it was a foot.
Toes.
Chocolate.
Yeah,
unbelievable
very,
stuff.
very nice.
Yeah, James Harrison.
Well, listen, it's summertime. In fairness, it'd be something wrong if we weren't talking about ice creams in summertime. My father used to always say when we used to go to the bog, when he went to the bog as a young fella, that they'd always get a coney caper on the way back. So I'd be interested to know if anybody knows what a coney caper is. I've been hearing it for 30 years and I'm still none the wiser.
Liam Linehan says provincial championships / qualifiers need to go for the long-term good of the game in hurling and football. The tough cornerback says Connacht final was not competitive in that second half. Finnerty and Comer would get tighter marked in training. It'll never happen abolishing the provincials or making them completely separate from the All-Ireland. Well, making them separate is the only way to improve the game. It needs to be a linear championship to have any hope. Anyway, I don't even want to go down the route of just talking about structures, because I'm sure that'll come up in the winter again. I'm not saying it's not something that we should talk about, but why be such a downer about these things on a day like this when, as we said, Galway, Derry, Dublin, not Kildare, and Kerry have won their provincial titles. So there was a few different things about that game, Galway's win over Roscommon, that were impressive. Galway hit 10 points from turnovers compared to 5 from Roscommon. And in a game where you lose by 3 points, that's obviously fairly definitive. Kieran Malloy snuffed out Enda Smith, which is, that's no mean feat. Like, he is such a good player, and he's a big, tall, rangy player who's fast, a great footballer. There's very little that Enda Smith doesn't have, actually. So that's a serious achievement by Kieran Malloy.
That goal chance, Shane, was a big kind of turning point as well.
Yeah.
Point / goal chance. It was a goal chance. But he just, it was funny because he obviously kind of punt kicked that ball. Did you see Killian McDade's point where he punt kicked at an angle? I haven't seen a score like that in many's a year. Like, it's such a hard thing to do. It's easy enough punt kick when you're going straight down at the goal, but the punt kick at the angle that he did, probably like a 45-degree angle, and it wasn't, it was kind of mixture of a punt kick and a Morris Fitz outside of the right almost. It was really mad kind of technique, but just a mad score, great score.
And we've already sort of half dismissed Galway from an All-Ireland tilt this year, but they are on the opposite side of the draw to Kerry and Dublin. Who knows who they'll get in the All-Ireland quarter-final because of the qualifiers, and the same for Derry in their quarter-final. But let's imagine a situation where it isn't a couple of big guns, let's say, for example, Tyrone or whoever, that they meet, and they get a winnable quarter-final, and then maybe Derry come through as well. All of a sudden, they're thinking, maybe we could make an All-Ireland final. You just don't know.
Well, it's funny, Shane, like Galway were probably maybe in a better place, shall we say, when they got to the 2018 All-Ireland semi-final. But that qualifier defeat, that round 3 defeat, or their Super 8's defeat to Monaghan, left them on the same side as Dublin. So while, it doesn't, like, the timing is not always perfect. Like, you could think we're going to get to an All-Ireland semi-final next year, or we're going to build and build and build. But if the opportunity arises for Galway, I'm sure they'll take it. And that side of the draw is definitely a small bit weaker. There's a man now, Conor Gilligan. I tell you, there's not too many people in Derry up at this hour of the day, I'd say, after winning an Ulster final.
Judging by the Snapchats and the social media that I woke up to this morning, there's a lot of people still never got home and still have no sleep. So I'm a wee bit hoarse here, but I'm a wee bit better than most this morning.
Well, look, it's brilliant that you joined us, Conor. We really, really appreciate it. Can you give us sort of, I suppose, the feeling at full time after extra time when Derry won 116 to 114 and it ends a 24-year famine run?
Yeah, well, look, Derry have been in this position before, and I've been in teams that have come down the stretch and have fallen short. And everybody went yesterday in the hope and expectation that this team was going to be good enough, but there were still question marks. What if they were behind? What if Donegal went after their kickouts? And both happened. Their kickouts malfunctioned a fair bit. Donegal went ahead by 2 points twice. They pushed on even an extra time, but this Derry team weren't to be denied with Brendan Rodgers given a performance for the ages. You know, to score 3 points from full back, marking arguably the most influential player of a generation, was just something that was so special. And at the final whistle, anybody that was there was just treated to something very special. The flood of red and white, and for anybody that wants rid of provincial championships, that had wanted to be in Clonus yesterday because it was good for the soul.
It really is one of those fabulous venues. I have to say, I was at an Ulster final a few years ago, and I just loved it because you're just in that natural bowl, and it just feels like the whole world is almost falling in on top of you in there. Like, how did you feel when that final whistle went?
Whenever Michael, it had everything. It went to extra time, and then they got a free 13 metres out, which if it goes into the net, you lose the Ulster Championship. And it's happened before, and the fear of that was just incredible. Once the ball ricocheted out and Derry got it, you knew the final whistle was coming. And when it did come, it was just an incredible feeling. And you looked around, and just to see the emotion in people's faces, and the majority of the crowd and the majority of kids that spilled into the ground weren't actually even born the last time Derry won an Ulster Championship. But the one thing that, the likes of Conor Doherty and Padraig McGrogan, they've been in Derry minor teams and Derry under-20 teams that have beaten Monaghan, Donegal, Tyrone. The inferiority complex of those younger players isn't there. They haven't suffered the bad defeats that some of us had. And probably at the finish up, Donegal, the defeats of the last number of years, and it maybe stifled them because we're 2 up twice, and instead of pushing on, they sat back as if afraid to actually go and win it. And that's the one thing where Declan Bonner will look at, and he'll be very disappointed with it.
Yeah, and the fact that you've beaten 3 Division 1 teams along the way, I mean, that shows nobody can question. Sometimes you hear that people question certain provincial titles because they've beaten Division 3 teams or Division 4 teams. Derry have done it the hard way, and I'm wondering, where does this put Derry in the overall pecking order heading into the rest of the season?
Yeah, well, they've broken through the glass ceiling now. They've won a provincial title. It's something to hang their hat on. And where they go now, Dublin, Kerry are obviously ahead of the pack at this point, but Derry's very much tucked in there with the rest of the teams. And Dublin and Kerry won't particularly relish playing a Derry team who are defensively very, very compact. And while they still have a wee bit to show, the fact that they tried to kick ball yesterday, the wider spaces of the likes of Croke Park might actually suit them, and their heavy running game, especially in extra time, was the difference. And they brought 6 players off the bench, which is very un-Rory Gallagher-like. He normally sticks with his starting 15. He brings on 1-2 subs, maybe. But they got a wee bit of depth into the bench, and all the young lads that came in, the Lachlan Murrays, and then the bit of experience with the likes of Paddy Cassidy, made a huge difference and got them over the line, because the longer that game was going on, Derry had the legs. They were going to win that game.
Connacht, it's probably wasn't for everybody, maybe the way the game was played out, but it is just a matter of time. When you're 24 years waiting for an Ulster title, it's just a matter of getting over the line, isn't it? It is literally just a matter of doing whatever you have to do, and that's what Derry did yesterday. They played better football to get to this point, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. Like, I look at Kerry winning the All-Ireland in 2014. Like, that was uncharacteristic, maybe, what they had to do. It goes against some Kerry principles or whatever, but they got over the line. And it was the same with Derry yesterday. You just do what you have to do on a given day.
Yeah, and like, if Derry had been playing Limerick yesterday, it could have been a very different game. But anybody that was going to an Ulster final in Clonus expecting a shootout was deluding themselves. when you have two Division 1 teams coming and it means so much to them, like they were going to be defensive. It was going to be a heavy possession-based game. And unfortunately, it doesn't add at times to the game. But it was thrilling in as far as, well, who's going to get the next score? Every point was so keenly fought that it was just a war of attrition. It was always going to be that way. But for Derry, nobody cares. It was about getting over the line. Derry have played in really good and exciting games before and came out second best. And that was never going to be good enough for anybody. Rory Gallagher teams, they have an identity. And for a long time, maybe Derry didn't have an identity. But if you look at Kerry and Dublin, whenever they lost the ball, they're flooding back into defence. And possibly at the minute, because of the opposition they're playing, they don't have the resistance whenever they do turn the ball over and go forward. I was in Croke Park for Dublin Kildare, and Kildare were brilliant for 4 or 5 minutes. And within 12 minutes, the game was cooked. So is that really what anybody wants? There was no benefit for Kildare, no benefit for Limerick. But the Ulster final won't be for everybody. But nobody in Ulster cares. It's something we're so proud of. And for anybody that is dead against provincial championships, it did the soul good just to see the Derry support. And the fact that it was a new winner, it was 24 years, just the spilling of emotion. If you win 2 or 3, it doesn't happen. It's just that one day, and for everybody there, it was a real treat.
Just after Connacht, I believe it was open season, was it, to get into the Derry dressing room after? It was like the old times, was it?
Yeah, like it was incredible. They just swung the doors open and the journalists came in, because there was just pandemonium in the tunnel. The security couldn't keep supporters out of the tunnel. They couldn't keep supporters out of the changing rooms. The players with children had them there. There were children were kicking football in the changing rooms. We were all in. It was something you would have seen 40 or 50 years ago. The professionalism of modern teams and trying to keep people away. And you know what? It added to the occasion, and everybody that was there just thought this was incredible. And the access to players after it, they didn't shy away. They didn't get onto the bus. The players were there for about 2 hours after the game, and that left them coming home very late to Mahara last night. And I would imagine there's very little sleep to be had, and possibly by Wednesday, someone or two of them will go to bed.
Do you think, Conlon, that Derry can kick on from here? Because All-Ireland quarter-final, you don't know who you're going to face in that. You're on the same side of the draw as Galway, and I know we're kind of imagining a couple of steps ahead. But do you look at this now and think this season is open and out for Derry because Galway or because Kerry and Dublin are on the other side?
I don't know. I think it depends who comes through the qualifiers and how they come through, and whether they sustain injuries, whether it's suspensions. Any team that comes through to meet Derry now is coming off the back of 2 victories against top-end opposition. So it is going to be very difficult. Derry's goal at the start of the year, Rory Gallagher said it before the championship draw was even made, that winning in Ulster is what they're really about. And they've done that now. And then it'll be reassessing that. No matter how it goes now, Derry have had an incredible season. Their trajectory is absolutely on the right way. The age profile of the players is just brilliant. So there's no reason why they can't kick on. But it is going to be difficult. Kerry and Dublin are a wee bit ahead of everybody else. And the rest of them, it's just about the momentum Derry carrying on, getting to Croke Park. The thing about it is Croke Park's a very different place to play. You can't shut it down in the same way you can shut down Clonus or the Athletic Grounds in Armagh. They're just different type pitches. Croke Park just plays bigger regardless of the dimensions, and it will be difficult for them. But the one thing they have is they have a kicking game. You seen yesterday even, you couldn't have turned a sweet in your mouth inside the 45, but yet, Ethan Doherty kicked 2 or 3 wee dink balls in, and they got points. Conor Doherty's point came off a wee dink ball in, and Derry did try it. And again, you look at how many times Derry tried the backdoor cut for the goal. Ethan Doherty, who I thought probably didn't get the plaudits of Brenton Rodgers and Chrissy McCaig yesterday, but I thought he was incredible. Every time Derry needed a line breaker, it was him. And every time he got the ball, he drew a couple of men to him, and it always left an overlap. And that wee backdoor cut that Dublin are so good at, that Kerry are so good at, Derry have a real grow for it now. And the fact of the goal for Niall Loughlin, Toner done great work. You see a lot of players coming in there fisting the point. He'd run out of room, but he had the composure to throw it across, and Loughlin had the composure to put it in. And it was a big score that really gave Derry a platform for staying in the game. Whenever Donegal had their purple patch, they didn't get too far ahead. If the game had been a draw, at that point it would have been over.
Did you think either of the goals should have been disallowed? I know there was talk last night about the way Stephen McGuigan took Stephen McMenamin out. Now, I'm not sure he intentionally tried to do it, but he did clean him out, and that allowed Niall O'Loughlin to finish. And then maybe, did you think there was a square ball for the Oran McFadden Ferry one?
Yeah, initially, I didn't actually see the first incident at the time. Looking back at it, I thought it was accidental enough, and it would have been very, very harsh to disallow that goal. Initially, when I seen the other goal, I thought maybe square ball, but I think the referee got it probably on the balance right. And it was a big goal. Like Donegal, it was going to take them a long time to get 3 points, to get 8 into Derry's score. So the goal there, it really set the game up for them, and they'll be disappointed that they didn't push on, especially when they had a 2-point lead twice. But I think on the balance of play, the referee, you have the black card incidents. On the balance of play, I think he got it just a bit right. One of them might have been, one of them might not have been, but they're the things. Refereeing is very, very difficult, and in a game like that where free kicks were so hard to come by, every decision had to be absolutely spot on, and referees have a hard enough job without me giving them a hard time. But I thought, on the balance of play, I thought the referee done very well yesterday.
Yeah, and I suppose myself and Michael were talking beforehand, where does Brendan Rodgers rank in terms of dual players across the country? Michael, obviously Brendan Rodgers, we've seen him do it against Ballyhale Shamrocks when they're at their height in an All-Ireland Club semi-final. There's other players you could talk about Keith Higgins, you could talk about Aidan Walsh over the years, Podge Collins, Con O'Callaghan. There are a lot of guys out there, but Brendan Rodgers at the moment has to be up near the top of the list.
Yeah, for sure.
And
sorry, go ahead.
What's great about him, Conlon, as the dual player is that he can play full forward for one team in the hurlers, or wing forward, and can play full back at the other. You look at Con, full forward probably for both. You look at Podge Collins, anywhere in the forward line, we'll say for both codes as well. But to be able to do it at different ends of the pitch in either code. And if you look at the Derry hurlers are obviously well behind the Derry footballers, but you throw Chrissy in there, throw Brendan Rodgers in there, and they're going to be they'll probably be up at Joe McDonough level as well. But he's just a phenomenal athlete, a phenomenal player, Conor, to be able to do that, as I say, at different ends of the pitch. And we were just saying before you came on, it was probably something that Donegal missed, to have Murphy following Rodgers in those last 10 or 15 minutes of extra time, making 100-yard sprints, trying to cover this lad who's an absolute gazelle in extra time. It was probably something that Donegal missed as well. It was probably a bit of a mismatch at that stage of the game. Yeah,
he's an incredible athlete. He's an incredible footballer, and the problem that Derry would have is that they would need two of them. You could play him in the half-back line, the half-forward line, and the one thing that he wouldn't be that well known for in Derry would be kicking outrageous points under pressure. And he done that yesterday. It was just his day. And as you say, he can play both ends. And you add Shane McGuigan into that Derry hurling team, and suddenly, you have a team that definitely could compete at a very, very high level. But in terms of Brendan Rodgers' performance, it's up there with the great Ulster final performances from Sean Kavanagh, from players like that. It's up there with it. 3 points. Donegal will look at that naively. We wondered, would Brendan Rodgers match up with Murphy, go out the field with him? I was surprised whenever Rodgers started causing a wee bit of trouble that Donegal didn't put Michael Murphy to full forward just to try and stem that. But look, he wasn't to be denied. And even towards the end, Chrissy McCaig ran at the very end, and you may be watching TV, didn't see it. He ran Paddy McBurdy 120 yards right up the field, and he had to follow him, and that just kept taking the sting out of the likes of McBurdy, who was just a poacher at that end of the field. So Derry technically got it spot on. Donegal changed their style to suit Derry, and they just weren't as efficient at it. One stage in the first half, Donegal's efficiency was 35% when Derry was 61%. So they were the big differences. Donegal had enough chances, but the Achilles heel that kept coming back to haunt them in previous years was not being able to get the scores on the board, and Derry were a wee bit better at that at times when they had the ascendancy.
Conlon, I know you briefly mentioned it earlier, but can I just ask you about those last 60 seconds where, potentially there could have been there was probably a penalty shout. The free was right on the borderline of a penalty as well. What are you thinking when Murphy is standing over the ball? The way it worked out, I don't think there's a better way to win a game and win an Ulster final with that drama, because it's in your hands 1 minute, it could be out of your hands the next. But what are you thinking for those last 60 seconds? What are you thinking when Murphy is standing over that free?
Yeah, well, the ball goes in, and you've seen penalties given. There was a lot of to and fro, and I think the referee got it right, but you've seen them given. And then when the free was given, you're going, right, it's 30 metres out. But the one thing that Murphy, he's as clever as you'll get as a player. a wee bit like the Cork goalies' penalties, where he threw the ball up in the air, then he run. Murphy was maybe 6 yards out by the time he kicked it, so he used his 4 steps really strategically. I thought it was a really brilliant move for him, but it was going to be eye of the needle stuff, and once it ricocheted out, it was hurting the mouse stuff, because to lose a game like that, would just have been, look, you would never got back. And once it ricocheted out, and it was Shane McGuigan who picked it up. And before that, when the high ball went in around the house, it was Shane McGuigan who caught it and came out, and then he took cramp after. Shane McGuigan shouldn't have been playing for the last 3 or 4 minutes. He was gone, but yet he was still the man. He wasn't to be denied, and his performance yesterday, while from play he only kicked 1 point, but some of his frees were from the top or from his wrong side when Neil Loughlin went off as well.
Well, look, Conlon, I know you have to get back to other work there at the moment, so really appreciate you joining us, and it was it really was very different. Thank you very much.
Enjoy, Conlon. Jeez, I'd say Derry is rocking this morning. As you said, and someone said to me yesterday, you can't be tired if you don't go to sleep. So I'd say that's what the way the Derry boys are today. I'd say they just go straight at it again. And it's good to hear even Rory Gallagher talking after. Like, you've been involved with teams as well, Shane. Like, these couple of days after winning something, like, you cannot buy them. It's just, and you could go on a training camp for 2 weeks and you wouldn't get the same as you would maybe 2 nights out together where everybody's together celebrating. You're just sitting there and you're just like, you can nearly sit there with, your legs crossed, and you're just thinking, like, what are we after achieving here? And it's unbelievable. And you just soak it in. That quiet moment probably won't happen for a couple of days, I'd say, when they're sitting at home by themselves. But it's just unbelievable what they're after achieving and how low they were when Rory Gallagher took them over, and just like the incredible high that they're after achieving now.
Yeah, just a couple of years ago they were playing in Division 4, and now they're knocking out Division 1 teams, beating 3 Division 1 teams to win an Ulster title. My favourite part actually of the game, and I know it took a lot of criticism, but I want to focus on the positives, is at the very end of the game, after they blocked that free from Michael Murphy, seeing them all come out in a convoy then.
Yeah.
The way they lurried the ball up the field. I was thinking, how do you have the energy to do this in the baking sun after going all the way to extra time, and you're coming out in a convoy like that? I just thought,
and it was the fact, Shane, that they stayed playing to their plan till the very last play, like. And I don't know who it was, ended up with the balls in his hand, in the ball in his hand like that. But it was just like to have that energy, to still be that clear in the mind at that stage. Like, you'd think nearly someone would have just booted it out over the sideline or something like that, or panic. But they were just so clear in the mind. They just stayed doing what they were doing. And like, if the referee hadn't blown the whistle, Derry were going to score again. 100% they were going to score again. They were going to create a chance to score.
So I noticed afterwards that Anthony Miles, he tweeted that the sooner the GA get rid of this stupid mark rule anywhere on the pitch, the better. Serves zero purpose for helping the intensity within the game. So that was something that kind of, because you had these periods where, Donegal would keep the ball at the back under no real pressure from Derry, and then vice versa. I was thinking, that's what kind of came to mind when I saw Anthony tweet that. And I do wish they'd get rid of the mark rule. I really, really don't like it. I'm happy with it from kickouts, but anything after that, it just slows up the game unnecessarily. Like, for example, when Con won the ball, which ended up with a goal, I think the one for Kieran Kilkenny earlier in the game, he caught a ball and then immediately took his man on. How often are we seeing forwards not take their man on? Because instead, the arm goes up and then they just take their 10 seconds and try to throw it over the bar. It just sucks the life out of the game.
Yeah, I agreed yesterday. Kevin Quinn scored 2 marks for Wicklow against Offaly yesterday. And I remember one of them, and like, it's just, you're an attacking player now. You're going to take your chance to score, particularly if you're under pressure. But he caught one in the second half. And I remember just thinking he had his hand up straight away, and there was someone just gone off his right shoulder for a quick hand pass if he was able to see it. I just don't like the attacking mark at all. I just think it goes against the principles of the game. We want the game to be faster. We want it to be free-flowing. And that just takes away from it. Garota Grackon is after doing a live draw of the Tailteann Cup for us here as well, Shane, which is great. And I have to say, you'll probably bring it up there in a second, but I'm delighted to see the Offaly draw anyway. We're in a semi-final essentially. You would think we're after drawing New York, so I'll just fly through them here. So Garota Grackon, fair play to them. These are the sort of viewers that we have, that they will keep us updated and things that are going on outside of the scene. So Leitrim and Sligo, that should be a belter of a Connacht derby there. The next one is Fermanagh v Cavan. Again, another difficult game to call. Carlow v Westmeath. and then Offaly v New York. So Offaly at home to New York, Carlow at home to Westmeath, Fermanagh at home to Cavan, and Leitrim at home to Sligo. So again, I'd imagine the Offaly game, you could call that fairly confidently and say that Offaly should be in the semi-finals. Interestingly, New York have New York ever travelled for a championship game before?
You'd imagine it has to have happened at some point, but you would also think the main reason it doesn't happen is because there's visa issues here, there, and everywhere. So you'd imagine it's very rare if it's happened at all. Somebody might know that out there. Please comment in if you do. Richard Hogan says you're counting chickens here.
Well, would you prefer I sat in the fence and say, I think that's a really tough draw or whatever? I think we should get over that one. John Martin was disappointed yesterday that they didn't have a chance to go and play in the Bronx. I think he thought there might be an idea that they might have to go and travel, as everybody does. Like Connacht, they're in a lucky position there. Like it's a great. I'd say like obviously you have a match at the end of it all, but it's great to get to go over to New York. No more than it is if you play London in it as well. But that's a good draw, and as I said, there is the carrot of live TV games for the 4 semi-finalists as well.
Porter says great win for Fermanagh and Leitrim. Fermanagh got to an All-Ireland semi-final before, dark horse for this tournament. They got to an All-Ireland quarter-final actually just a few years ago. Remember that day that it was the Sean Quigley versus Stephen Cluxton show, and he pushed him into the net for one of the goals.
Right,
and it brought I think he was smirking away at Quigley, and they brought his picture, like it was his headshot, up on screen as he was smirking after the goal. So he became a bit of a pantomime villain, but it was all in good fun too, because the Dublin supporters knew they were going to win the game anyway. So it was kind of just a bit of crack towards the end of the game there. We've talked about Derry beating Donegal and how good that was. Galway beating Roscommon in their final. Let's talk about Dublin winning 5-17 to 1-15 against Kildare. It was just a bit of a washout. I have to say, I was more frustrated with Kildare than anything else early on in the game. They left themselves exposed. So often Dublin would carry the ball up the field. There'd be no real contact with a Dublin player, no real pressure. Didn't really seem like they knew what they wanted to do. Too often Dublin were able to get their kickouts out of the way under no pressure at all. Kildare didn't really seem to have a plan B if they weren't able to get theirs off. And a few times they went long with their kickouts early in the game. They didn't win it. And immediately they were massively exposed at the back. Quick ball in. Dublin always had a man in there. He secures the ball, and then there's someone always coming off the shoulder, whether it's Costello, Kilkenny. There was always somebody there. And then in the several minutes after the first couple of goals, Kildare went up the field, pot shot, wide. Dublin go up and get a couple of more scores, and it's game over after maybe 10 or 12 minutes. I just found myself frustrated with Kildare, but at the same time, applauding Dublin because they knew how to put them away.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you have to play a double sweeper for the whole game or anything like that, or even play a sweeper for the whole game. But surely from a Kildare point of view, you just can't leave yourself in the position where Con is one-on-one inside, and where if it's a good ball in, the defender, no matter who the defender is going to be under pressure. I just couldn't believe that for the first 10 or 15 to keep them, make sure. I don't think this is in any way negative. It's just get yourself into a game, get a bit of confidence going. Just cut off that avenue in front of the goals. Make it so that if Con wins the ball, okay, he has to turn back, he has to pass the ball back, or he has to take a shot for a point. Like, if Dublin were, 7 or 8 points up, or like 7-2 up or 7-3 up in the early stage, Kildare is still in the game. But just the fact that like the ball went in and it was just an off the shoulder run, say by Kilkenny for the first goal. There was no one tracking his run amazingly. I'm just very surprised with how naive Kildare were in that respect. I had a bit of doubt, about their defence maybe coming into this game, and just how easily they were conceding scores. I don't know if the Newbridge game in the league gave them a bit of a false sense of security that they could just go at Dublin man on man, and like they did in the league to an extent, and get away with it. But just what you said there about them taking pot shots, the Dubs are so cute in that respect. There's an area where they let you shoot from. They're happy for you to shoot from there because it's a low percentage shot. And Kildare took on a good few snapshots the other day that just, they weren't really on, or it was a 50-50 kind of a shot. It's a 50-50 shot when spirits are up and you're going well in the game. It's it's probably a 30-70 shot when things are going badly, as they were in the game, and the pressure ramps up. You drop a ball into the keeper, you put a ball wide, and then all of a sudden you know, there's nearly a collective groan going around Croke Park. But fairness to Kildare, no more than Roscommon in the Connacht final, they stayed going, particularly Roscommon in the Connacht final. They stayed going, and Anthony Cunningham has something to build on there. Kildare, to a lesser extent, they obviously do have a chance to turn around their season in the qualifiers, but like it was just like the balloon was popped after 10-15 minutes, and this game was over, partly from Kildare's naivety, partly from Dublin's brilliance as well.
Yeah, like Dublin conceded 11 goals in the league, got relegated, didn't look particularly impressive, looked disjointed. You had players doing things that they wouldn't ordinarily do, you know, like pumping the ball up the field straight to a sweeper or whatever. But they were really well organised here. They knew where to get pressure on. It was Kildare who ended up pumping the ball upfield to Dublin's spare man at times, which is, I was just so frustrating to watch. You would have, I just expected an awful lot more from Kildare. Now, we spoke with Davy Burke, the former Kildare under-20 manager from the 2018 All-Ireland win, and he said that when they were playing Westmeath in the semi-final, he felt that the wing forwards were nearly pushing too far forward, that the team was tilted towards an attacking mindset, and maybe that was his concern coming into this game. And I suppose in many ways that was proven. Now, the return of Conor Callaghan has obviously changed things in the forward line. I mean, look, sure, I've seen it many times with our hurling team over the league, over the years with Kula, that when he's in the team, it's a very different proposition to when he's not in the team. But I have Dublin as my number one at the moment because, I don't know, Tyrone haven't been down so many players. They're just not blowing me away at the moment. Obviously got knocked out of their provincial championship. They'll have a tough route back. Mayo, it's the injuries as much as anything else. Kerry, yeah, look, I agree. They're obviously one of the top contenders at the moment, but it's a bit like when Cork won the All-Ireland in 2010. Right up until the point that they won the thing, not everybody fully bought into them. And until I see Kerry nearly win an All-Ireland, I'm not going to fully buy into it. But the other thing about Dublin, I saw Eamon Fitzmaurice writing about this, he was saying that Dublin have moved away from the possession game. You know, when they used to bring the ball up the field, bring it up one flank, then, you know, switch it the whole way around, just move it around. I think Colin Nally, the Meath coach, referred to it as Kieran Kilkenny as a swinger player. So he swings it around from one side to the other. But they're kicking it inside more. They've runners coming off. It just seems a bit more dynamic. But it is dependent, too, on a team being as naive as Kildare were.
Just, it's funny you say there. I remember Brian Fenton at different stages during the league kind of half bombing a ball into the square, and it was a low percentage ball, whereas now the ball he's putting in is a lovely ball, probably to the chest of Con or the chest of Dean Rock, or just angled over the defender. I think there's a lot more, it's a lot more measured, definitely, than it was at different stages throughout the league. And there's a far greater willingness with them to kick the ball now as well. As you say, that kind of possession going from one side of the field to the other, yeah, it happens at different stages, but they do want to kick the ball. And particularly, their running game, particularly off the shoulder, is so strong now. And that's probably not something we would have seen. The ball wouldn't have been kicked in as much, so you just wouldn't have seen it with Dublin in previous years, where they are doing it now, and there's lads absolutely flying off the shoulder. So definitely, it'd have, from a Dublin point of view, to be a fair bit of optimism. And if they're playing Kerry in the semi-final, I'll put it this way. Like, Kerry will have to be 3 or 4 points better than Dublin to win that game. I don't know if Kerry are going to win a tight game against the Dubs, even with just the baggage from previous years, the baggage even going back to, actually the baggage going back a long way, but then particularly to that 2019 drawn All-Ireland final. They're going to have to be 3 or 4 points better than them to beat them. If it's a 50-50 game, Dublin win it, in my view. If Dublin take them down the stretch, I think all the old demons, all the old psychological frailties come back to roost again. But I just hope that materialises. I just hope that semi-final materialises, because we're probably going to have to wait until that stage for the football championship to really take off. But that game would absolutely light it up.
Yeah, well, at the same time, I think some of the qualifiers that are going to go ahead next weekend are tasty enough. Clare Meath, Mayo Monaghan, I think, is the one that jumps off the page on the Saturday. Corker against Louth, it's probably the game that probably will generate least hype going into it. And then Armagh Tyrone, that should be a bit of a killing match, really. You can imagine the two teams going for each other in a big way there. A couple of final stats, I suppose, about the Kildare Dublin game that I wanted to touch on. I already mentioned the shot selection and gifting the ball away, but Kildare conceded 1-7 off turnovers, which is, that's going to kill you in most games. Dublin, they scored 2-10 off their own kickouts. So two things that I'm sure Glenn Ryan would have wanted to do going into the game is obviously not give Dublin a brilliant platform off the kickouts. They did do that, and often I thought they just completely sat off the kickout and just gifted it to Dublin. And the other thing is turnovers. You have to take care of the ball. That's the same in every single sport. Add those two things together, and that's 317 out of 517. Those two things that are supposed to be a controllable, but they certainly weren't.
No, definitely not. Yeah, if you're talking about manager or a team going after certain aspects, they would have been definitely two aspects that you would imagine that Kildare would have went after, and they were just absolutely blown away in both regards. It's kind of difficult from a Dublin point of view. I suppose you can only judge what you can see and who they're playing on a different day. They've done exactly like the Dublin of old would have done throughout their 3 Leinster Championship games. It's going to be interesting when the pressure is put on them, probably should be put on them in a quarter-final and to be really tested. But really in that semi-final, it's funny, the teams that you're talking about, 1 and 2, there's doubts about both. And I think that's what makes it really interesting. Are Dublin as good as we think they are based on what we've seen in the last 3 games, or have they not really been tested? Do Kerry have the mental capacity to get over this big challenge? So that's why that's going to be so fascinating. I just hopefully it materializes. But it was just interesting to hear Desi Farrell talking about league relegation and learning. And even when you were talking about the league next year, I'm just thinking you have the Ulster champions and the Leinster champions both in Division 2 next year. Division 2 is it's always a shark tank, but it's going to be particularly bad next year. But Desi Farrell just said, even in the depths of your depression and failures, there's always some learnings and something to be taken from that. We were integrating new players, trying out new things in terms of the game plan and performance that weren't really coming to fruition. We probably still should have held on in Division 1, but we didn't. And that gave us a reason to do some soul searching and to reflect upon what it is we're about and what it is we're trying to achieve this season. So kind of, it looks like they've asked themselves some hard questions, and they've never really had a point to prove before, whereas they do now. And that's kind of a dangerous thing for the chasing pack, or I don't know if you'd say if the chasing pack. Dublin are probably in the chasing pack to some respect, but it's a dangerous thing when a team that's been that successful has a point to prove again and have been forced to question what they're doing and tinker with what they're doing. And the changes they've made definitely look so far so good anyway.
Yeah, and like some of those players that have really bedded in now, Larkin O'Dell looks a really good player from Temple Oak, Sing Street. Whitehall, Colin Kilman, Lee Gannon, he's really settled down. I think he had a couple of rash moments during the league games. I remember in particular against Armagh, nudging a lad out over the end line to gift away a free when the ball was going harmlessly wide. Evan Comerford, now he doesn't have this whole soundtrack of Willie Won't He with Stephen Cluxton happening around him. He's back between the posts. Thought he was good the other day. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. If you want any of the jerseys that we're wearing or any of the ones on screen, go and check out the website. You get 15% off with the promo code OurGame. There's definitely a few comments worth touching on here. Good to see Leitrim back on the horse after the Galway defeat, says Shawnee K. Adrian McGrath makes a really good point here. How the hell will New York afford travelling hotels in Ireland at the moment? And you know what? This is just something now that was really brought into focus with the Kerry hurlers, who can't actually afford to go up and stay the night for the Joe McDonagh final against Antrim because hotels aren't available really. And I mean, I don't know how many hotels are taken up with, what's happening at the moment with the humanitarian issue with Ukraine and all that. So, I mean, obviously I'm not taking a pop at that, not in any way, shape or form. But what I'm saying is the availability isn't really there. And this is where it now becomes really crucial, the timing of games. So the team, like for example, Kerry are going to fly up in the morning and get the bus back down in the evening. Obviously, New York don't really have that option. But this is something that's possibly going to become more and more of an issue as time goes on here, especially if you have a huge amount of games on the weekend as we're going to have at the moment. And if you've had, let's say, a qualifier draw the week before you're due to play a game, all of a sudden, like hotels can be booked out everywhere, and you're caught, and you might have a huge commute that you might have to make the day of a game. And if you have an early throw-in for a game as well and you can't go up the night, it becomes very difficult. Yeah,
it does indeed. And like I see, Kerry forked out 13 grand to secure accommodation for the All-Ireland quarter-final in 4 weeks' time. Before they actually forked it out before the provincial decider. And you can say that that's forward thinking and maybe looking past Limerick. I don't think anybody's probably thinking that now, but that's the sort of cost that we're talking about. Kerry are playing at 5 o'clock in the McDonagh on Saturday. Just travelling up that day, probably not ideal, particularly travelling back that night is not ideal. And they're going to have a game. They'd have a game a week after or 2 weeks after, regardless of the result as well. So It's getting like I'm going to covering the Galway races in what is the end of July, first week in August. Like hotel prices, absolutely astronomical. It's crazy money, and you have to kind of almost predict or plan and think of where you're going to be, and that's obviously a risky game as well. But it's just astronomical money involved there. I don't know what New York are going to do. Going to be crazy money. And they obviously would have had no idea where they were going to stay. But hopefully the Tullamore Court or the Bridge House or someone down in
Would you
in
put a few
Tullamore,
people up? Is Johnny Glynn still playing? You probably know him. You can put him up for the night.
Yeah. Listen, if they want to, I'll sort out something in Dooley's Hotel or the County Arms in Burr. Absolutely no bother. Only half an hour spin. They can do their warm up in St Brendan's Park in Burr as well if they want. Just give me a holler.
I thought you only allow hurling in St Brendan's Park.
Not at all. There was all Ireland junior football finals played there back in the day.
Jerry Brown says New York travelled to Roscommon in 2001. Think that was due to the foot and mouth, or as we said locally, the feet and teeth.
Very good. No, I hadn't realised that now, to be honest with you. Yeah. But it's obviously a big deal for them. They got 2 byes to get to this stage. So, and they obviously performed. It was a Sligo that went over to New York. They performed well against them as well in that kind of quarter final. So they're definitely they're not making up the numbers, but Offaly have played 2 games in a row. We're playing Division 2 this year. New York are probably still going to be up against it. And based on what I saw yesterday, Offaly are taking the Tailteann Cup pretty seriously as well.
Yeah, this certainly seems to be the way John Mahon was talking about it afterwards. So Kerry won by 128 to 8 points against Limerick in their Munster provincial final. It was a bit of a non-event. I suppose beforehand when you saw that David Clifford wasn't going to be playing, I would imagine that the interest level beyond the 2 counties that were competing was minimal enough.
What did you think when Clifford is out? Because immediately for me, it just sucks some energy out of it, because it's just such a joy to watch. Because on a given day, no matter who they're playing, you're kind of thinking you could see anything, and it kind of sucked a bit of the enjoyment out of it for me. Then on a Limerick point of view, I'm kind of thinking, okay, this game has a fair chance of being a good bit more competitive now with him not playing. Now, it didn't turn out that way. And I know you got a bit of heat on Twitter when you put up, I think was it the Kerry 15 without Clifford, and you just kind of remarked that it's not. You can read it out there yourself, but I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, I just said I know they have a good bench and there's lots of quality players here, but Kerry without David Clifford don't scream All-Ireland #1 contenders. They're a very good team. There's no bad player listed there, but I just don't know if it's got the stellar list of really top players who've done well. Obviously, Kerry last won an All-Ireland in 2014. They don't have a host of players who've won a load of All-Irelands. That's just not the way it is. But there's areas there. I look at the half back line. I look at midfield. We've been wondering, is the inside forward line as good as what Galway have, what Dublin have? Obviously, you're going to put Clifford back in there, and then straight away the full forward line is back up there. But I just don't know if there's enough star power in there to really have them as the #1 contender that so many seem to think they are.
Well, I put it to you this way, Shane. We'll just say Khan in particular brings that X factor. Comer or Shane Walsh would bring that X factor. Potentially Rob Finnerty could bring that as well. Shane McGuigan has that X factor for Derry. Without Clifford, you saw it in the All-Ireland semi-final last year when he was off the pitch with cramp. Kerry are missing that X factor without him. Yes, they were able to put up, a ridiculous score like they did the other day, 128 without him. But yeah, they are missing that without him in their lineup. I think it was just a minor niggle. Jack O'Connor just said we weren't being overly clever or weren't being clever or anything, but we thought it was going to come right. But it just took a little longer to come around than we thought. I think he picked up a knock. They played Roscommon in a challenge game and he picked up a bit of a minor knock. Don't think it's going to be any issue. And I think they have 4 weeks now to prepare. But yeah, they're not going to win the All-Ireland without him on the pitch. Definitely, in my opinion, anyway. I don't think there's a chance of that happening. And they definitely don't look as potent without him. You're thinking, you're just going to have to double mark him on a given day. That allows other lads to flourish, even if he doesn't flourish himself. Whereas that threat, would a team potentially go man to man? If Clifford was off the pitch, one of the really top teams, potentially they could. But the other night, we didn't really learn anything about Kerry again. To be fair, the only thing I will say is, and you had it in our research doc there, Kerry's cuteness with regards to fouling now There's definitely something there. There's definitely showing a lot of street smarts. I don't know if it's Paddy Tally's influence or not. You might just go into it a bit more there now, but it definitely looks like they're learning how to tactically foul, shall we say.
Yeah, I don't think this is anything new for them either. You could go back 10 years to when they played, I think it was Tyrone in that qualifier down in Killarney. They were well able to do the systematic fouling back then. But Kerry had 18 fouls in this game. Limerick had just 5. So that kind of tells you straight away that Limerick were not fouling when they needed to foul. You need to get that foul in good and early and try and act all innocent to the referee, because obviously you can't afford to give away a black card either. And the fact that Kerry got 16 points from turnovers show you that Limerick didn't really know when to slow the game down. So that there's an element of some smarts there. But I'll just talk about some of the different players who did the scoring for Kerry. Sean O'Shea scored 6 points, 2 of those from place balls. Killian Spillane was the star turn with 1-3. Gainey with 4 points, including a mark. Tony Brosnan and Tom O'Sullivan with 3. Micheál Burns with 2. And same with Brian O'Bjuglig and Paddy Clifford. Gavin White, Adrian Spillane and Stephen O'Brien with 1 apiece. Cian Sheehan scored 3 points for Limerick, to be fair to him. Ian Corbett scored 2, so did Josh Ryan, including a brilliant one from out on the sideline. And Gordon Brown scored a point. So Killian Spillane thought he was really, really good, and he's kind of nailed, I suppose, laid down a marker at least with Jack O'Connor to say I should be starting the next day out. Do you know one of the other things that I think took away from it a little bit? This whole thing, and you'd see it with Galway against Westmeath as well, when both teams had the same colours primarily, and they end up both wearing their chain strips. It looked like 2 teams wearing their training outfits, which I think took something away from it as well. You want to see Kerry in the green and gold, and I actually think Limerick look all right in white, but just that chain strip with Kerry looks a bit like a training top.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I have no problem with one team, particularly the home team, wearing their away kit, and then the other team just wearing their normal kit. If a team has home advantage, I think the least they could do is change their jersey. They already have an advantage. Porter's thrown it in there. Tip won't have any hotel problem.
I was trying to flash that up quickly without you commenting.
Yeah, no, mad to think that both the hurlers and footballers are gone before we hit June. It's crazy, really. Like, you were probably hanging your hat on the footballers maybe getting a run in the Tailteann Cup. Actually, listen, maybe the hurlers will have another game. Yes, who knows? But I'm gone totally off topic there now. But I do agree on the jersey front. It can just look a bit strange and convoluted. I would say the home team wears away kit and the visiting team wears their normal kit. I think problem solved then.
Yeah. So afterwards, Jack O'Connor was asked about, the fact that they didn't really get a test. I mean, beforehand, they got a test for maybe 40 minutes or so against Cork, but then Cork faded away, and that bench that Kerry have, more and I think it was Paul Murphy and maybe Paul Gainey came on that day, and they helped kind of drive them on, but Cork faded out. But he was asked about this and the structures, and he goes, to be fair to him, I can kind of agree. After you win a Munster final, 83rd one for Kerry, by the way, it's not my issue. Sure, of course, people will talk like that, but what can you do? We just have to play the game that are in front of us and do as good as we can. So that's for somebody else to decide, which I agree with. Now, the other thing is, on the Sunday game, I think Colin Cooper and co, they were talking about maybe Kerry weren't that little bit clinical in front of goals. Now, when you win a game by as much as this, I think the only analysis sometimes that you can do is, well, what didn't they do? Or is there something that we can pick at? Because, the scoring was great, the carrying the ball was great, lots of different guys got on the score sheet. But Billy Lee made a comment afterwards that would make it suggest, I think you might have the comment there, which suggests that there was a little bit of mercy on behalf of Kerry because they could have ran up maybe even a bigger scoreline.
Yeah, definitely from Billy's point of view anyway, he kind of seems to think maybe that Kerry didn't go for their throat, or as you said, they showed a bit of mercy. He just said, what I would say about Kerry, they're always respectful of the opposition. They could have kicked another couple of goals today and they took the points. I've always known that about Kerry. They don't tattoo a team when they have them beat. They're respectful, and that's not unnoticed. Definitely not unnoticed from his point of view, and that's obviously something that he feels, because he feels they could have really just gone for them and potentially hit 4 or 5 goals if they want to. I'm not sure what to think of it. I'm not sure. Like I tell you, Dublin definitely wouldn't show any mercy and haven't shown any mercy. That's not to say they're not respectful of other teams, but they're not that respectful where if they can hit 8 goals against you, they will. Like, so I don't know if that's a weakness or not, or I just thought it was an interesting comment from an opposition manager. It's funny what you're saying about Jack O'Connor as well. The guy kind of noticed it with the Offaly minor hurlers. So they won that Leinster final, a couple of weeks ago, and they're waiting for a semi-final. I think it's 2 weeks away, and Galway, Laois and Clare are all battering each other in a round robin to get through to the All-Ireland semi-finals. And Laois will have had 2 games. If Laois qualify, they're playing Clare next weekend in a kind of a do-or-die game to see who gets through. They will have had 2 games since being beaten by Offaly in the Leinster final. So who's in a better position going into an All-Ireland semi-final? It's funny. It's a weird kind of one where the winners are punished almost in a weird kind of a way. Would you not, I don't think any team, you want to be waiting 4 weeks. They probably try to organise a challenge game maybe. Who do you play during that time? I'm not sure who you're able to play. One of the other provincial champions? Unlikely, because you're going to play them potentially at another stage and nobody's going to show their hand. So you're in a difficult kind of a spot there. And I just don't think the winners should be punished in that regard. Do you know what I mean? Whereas teams coming through the qualifiers will have 2 games played, will have had a little bit of a break, 2 games if they get to that stage, and will be road tested to the max when they come into an All-Ireland quarter-final, semi-final.
Yeah, I suppose I'm going to bring up a video now. We'll come back and talk Tailteann Cup in a little while, but we're going to do the Hurling Power Rankings. We haven't done one for a while, and sure, look, we've probably let ourselves down with a little bit of it. It hasn't worked out perfectly for us. But by the way, those of you that haven't signed up for the Patreon show on Thursday with Richie Power and Kieran Kerry, here's a little bit of a snippet. It's patreon.com/OurGame, just a $5 a month. And this is Kieran Kerry talking about the cheek of him to be playing soccer the same day as a league game against Tipperary.
We were preparing for Tipperary, the quarter-final of the league, and I think it might have been back in 94 or 5 or 6. I don't know the year, but it was definitely one of those. And myself and Anthony Camry were playing here local at Patrick's Well. And we were playing, I think it might have been a semi-final of a cup, and it clashed with the Tipperary and Limerick game. So Anthony says to me, what do we do, Kieran? I said, we'll tag out soccer tomorrow and we'll play the first half of the soccer. I said, we'll say nothing about it, we'll keep it nice and quiet. So we played the first half. Half time came. Anthony said, well, come on, we'll belt away. It was then all. I said, no, we'll give it another 10 minutes. So within the next 10 minutes, Anthony Camerdy actually twisted his ankle, right? Oh. So we were heading down to the match, so we kind of come up with a plan. He said, what do I do? I said, whatever you do, in my own naivety now, as if to say that they were never going to hear this, but in my own naivety, I said, Anthony, whatever you do, I said, run out to the field normal, go through the warm-up, and then you twisted your ankle, right? So Anthony came along and he played the game. He was called off after about 15, 20 minutes. We were training Monday night. Tom Ryan called both us into the office. Anthony Cameron never got a Limerick jersey again. And he kind of gave me a slap in the wrist and held on to me.
Jesus. It's amazing. I don't know if it had been another player, you might have just got a slap on the wrist now, Kieran, I'd say somehow.
No, but sure, even when you think of the madness of playing a soccer match the same morning of a National League game down against Tipperary. Madness. And I suppose I didn't want, my thinking at the time, I was young at the time, I said, I didn't want to leave the soccer boys down.
How did you hurl? Hey, Kieran, how did you hurl?
Sure, Richie, you know that, answer yourself.
See the full show at Patreon.com. You can be sure that he was good. You can be sure he was a good soccer player too. Just like I believe Keane Lynch is too. So patreon.com/OurGame. If you want to get that show every Thursday, it's been flying. There's been great crack on it. I suppose it's time to do our Hurling Power Rankings. We'll come back and talk about the Tailteann Cup in a little bit of time. But I might as well just bring up our last one and just put it side by side with what our latest one is going to be. Limerick, Waterford, Cork, Dublin, Tipperary at number 5 is sticking out. Wexford.
No, Shane, no. We've updated this since. Yeah, no, we have. We did. I think we did one post league, and Dublin were well down. Now, in fairness, because this makes look like right Egypt. We definitely updated it throughout the league. Cork went down a bit. Kilkenny went up a bit. Galway went up a bit. 100% we did, definitely. So, I have no problem slating myself at different stages, but this was before Dublin played Kilkenny in the league, this power rankings.
Oh, was it? Jeez, because
Yeah.
I can't actually find the one that we did most
No,
recently.
no, 100%. Any lads that are watching regularly will definitely know. Kilkenny went up a lot. Galway went up a lot as well. Dublin went down to 7 or 8, I think, as well. And Clare were risen to maybe 4 or 5 the last time as well. But we'll have a good bash at what we're at now. Are we looking at 1 to 8 here on who's left, or are we still throwing in the teams that are gone? Are we throwing in the Tipperaries, the Dublins, the Waterfords of this world?
I think we should nearly, just to see how bad we reckon they are, good that we reckon they are. Look, Limerick in at number 1. There's no real debate about that, is there?
No debate. No, not really. No.
I have Clare as number 2 now.
Yeah, well, I'll put it to you this way: undefeated throughout Munster. Drew at Limerick already, albeit a Limerick side that was missing Gallan and Keane Lynch. Absolutely battered Waterford. Fair enough. Waterford were looked like a busted flush, but Clare couldn't have done much more than they've done so far. They're in the Munster final, and they're in with a fighting chance in the Munster final as well. We know from form this year that they can put it up to Limerick in both league and championship. So I have no issue with Clare number 2.
Yeah, well, look, a Clare native, Adrian McGrath, says, how do you power rank? Clare could beat Limerick. Limerick definitely beat Cork, but Cork could beat Clare. Galway to lose Leinster, but should beat Cork. Cork beat Kilkenny. Wexford can't beat Clare. Wexford can beat Kilkenny, but not Westmeath. So, I mean, this is the whole thing. It's very definite. It's not like you have a league table in soccer, and at the end of the year, Man City end a point ahead of Liverpool. So, therefore, you can't deny the fact that there was such a huge amount of games available to you that you have to accept that they were the number 1 team. You're going a little bit on instinct, on feeling, on, I suppose, styles make fights. Sometimes, maybe Clare are more suited to playing Limerick than, for example, Tipperary might be, or that Cork might be. So some of it is just kind of like the eye test, the feeling about how you think certain teams will go, how they've done in the past couple of seasons, how much do you believe in a certain team, because at least they showed you last season that in a tight game they can get X, Y, or Z done. Or maybe there are players who you think, well, this lad is, as you'd say, coming to hand in horse racing terms this season. So there's a whole lot of different reasons, but there's no exact science around it. It's just like a feeling in many situations, and there's no way around that, is there?
No, I think on Adrian's question there, a consistency and a bit of longevity comes into it as well. Like Limerick have done it since 2018, have been up there the whole time. They've dipped throughout a league maybe, but throughout championship, like they were brilliant in championship in 18, 19, albeit beaten in the All-Ireland semi-final, 20, 21, and they've been brilliant in championship in 2022 as well. So and there's no sign of them slowing down really. There was another question asked there. Or Garota Grackon asked, would there be debate on Limerick on number 1 next week? So to me, even if Clare beat Limerick, and I think it would be a tight game if Clare were to win, there's still the caveat probably of Keane Lynch being back for a knockout game, be it a quarter-final or semi-final. So there's still probably further improvement from Limerick to come. Like if you're number 1 without the 2-time hurler of the year and you're beaten by a couple of points, I think you're still number 1, because he's going to be potentially he's going to be back as well. But listen, that's all part of the fun of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely is. Now, I think some people in Galway might say, hey, why aren't we number 1 here? Number 2 here. But I still think it has to be Clare. I think Cork got to the All-Ireland final last year, and the last couple of games they've shown a little bit more about they've shown a little bit more of what they're about. But you couldn't have them up there just yet. Is there anyone else? Like, obviously, Watford have kind of nosedived the last couple of weeks. There's no way you can have them in there. Wexford, yes, they won in Kilkenny, but they did draw Westmeath, like Adrian has explained there. It's hard to say if you'd have them up there just yet. Kilkenny, there's some parts where you'd be like, well, you can't not believe in them because they've got Owen Cody, Adrian Mullen. But then the flip side is they probably have the most unsettled-looking team of any of the teams that are going into the... I suppose there's 8 teams left at this stage, but obviously the competition is structured the way it is. But anyway, of the teams left, you'd say they're the most unsettled looking, and they do have plenty of questions around them. And then there's no getting away from it. Leinster is not as strong as Munster, so you're almost leaning towards the Munster teams by virtue of getting out of that bear pit.
Yeah. To some extent, yeah. Like Munster is so hard to get out of, and Galway have have we learned too much about Galway yet? Probably not. We haven't really learned much when they play. Even when they play Cork potentially, or they play Clare, maybe or obviously if they play Limerick, that's when we'll really know about them. But I'd probably have. I don't know. Galway, Cork. I'd say Galway. It's between Galway and Cork for 3 and 4, realistically.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't have Cork behind Kilkenny, for example, because they beat them in the league semi-final and they beat them in the All-Ireland semi-final last year. Now, people are quick to poo-poo Cork, but you can't ignore that. And they got further, they've gotten further than Galway did last year. So, I don't know. I think maybe you could make a fair case for Galway or Cork number 3. But Kilkenny are back-to-back Leinster champions. So they'd say, well, why on earth don't you have us ahead of them? Now, they only lost them by a point recently. But the Leinster finals are the one that matters. So in a way, you almost have to have Kilkenny higher than Galway if you're going to go on results. But the feeling is that I would imagine that Galway will get closer to Limerick than Kilkenny would. And this is why it's impossible to just nail down a formula.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that. Obviously, you go back to Kilkenny are the last team to beat Limerick in a championship game as well. And aside to that, I still think he never said openly, but I still think John Kyle, I think they're mad to right that wrong. And I even get that feeling. I even get that feeling massively from Kieran Kerry as well, that if there's one box that they have to tick, it's getting revenge on Kilkenny. But as you said, I don't know, Kilkenny could potentially put it up to Limerick again. You just don't know, and there's a bit of form there to say that they might, but they just haven't. They were brilliant against Dublin. That form didn't work out at all. They were, to me, they were atrocious against Wexford. That was the worst performance I've seen from Kilkenny in a long, long time. Yes, they're back-to-back Leinster champions, but they're probably going into this Leinster final under a bit of a cloud. I wonder how many changes will there be for Kilkenny, even in the match day squad. I think there'll be an absolute heap of changes because that's generally how Cody reacts these days. But Kilkenny are probably 5 for me, realistically, and it's probably Galway 3, Cork 4, Kilkenny 5. That would be my thoughts on it at the moment. Anyway, Cork are still there, but based on their first 2 games and how it doesn't look like they're getting any closer to Limerick, in my view, I'd probably have Galway at 3 because they were consistent throughout Leinster.
Yeah, I've actually put Wexford 5 and Kilkenny 6 here. You don't fully agree with that, no? Wexford beat Kilkenny.
It's a difficult one because obviously Wexford beat Kilkenny. But if you're taking the Leinster Championship as a whole, it's difficult. Wexford drew at Galway. They hammered Laois. They drew at Westmeath. They beat Kilkenny. Kilkenny were beaten by Galway and beaten by Wexford. It seems a bit mad to put a team ahead of, Wexford were 3rd in Leinster and we're putting them ahead of Kilkenny. But I understand where you're coming from as well.
Yeah, do you know what? Kilkenny tend to get further in the championship and they've won back-to-back Leinster titles. I think we have to give them their dues here and say that Wexford have to do a little bit more than beat them once by just a point to be ahead of them here. Even though, I've pointed out, I think there are frailties with this Kilkenny team.
Yeah, I think it was 4, wasn't it? I think they actually beat them by 4. But
by 4.
If you had £100 on, who's going to go farther in the championship, Kilkenny or Wexford, who would you put it on?
Kilkenny.
Okay, and I'd be the same, and they are going for a hat-trick of Leinster titles as well. And despite Galway being a couple of places ahead of them, it's far from inconceivable to think that Kilkenny would win the Leinster final on Saturday.
Yeah, look, it's really, really fine margins between, I think, pretty much everyone from 2 to 6 here. Maybe Clare that bit ahead because they just look intensity-wise and the way they work in packs that they can get a little bit higher than the others, but remains to be seen. Adrian McGrath says, there are signs of Limerick slowing down for me. Average league, can see 2 late goals versus Waterford, 60 minutes versus Tip, 70 minutes versus Clare, very competitive. Still the best, but teams are getting to the base camp now, which is a fair point. That might be very well be the way. So we've gone with the top 6 teams are the teams that are getting through. We know Antrim and Kerry are in the All-Ireland preliminary quarterfinals. It's just a case of seeing who wins it and who goes through as the runner-up. But if we're to talk about the other teams that got knocked out of the provincial championships, who are you going with 7th here? Are you looking at Dublin? Are you looking at Waterford? Are you looking at Tipperary? Are you looking at who are you looking at here?
Well, Waterford are ahead of both Dublin and Tipperary anyway. just wondering about some other teams. So Westmeath need to come into the equation at some stage. Laois are probably going to be down the bottom. Antrim need to come into the equation as well, and Kerry need to come into it too. I probably have Waterford at 7. Yeah, they still won the league. They beat Tipperary by 4. I'm still scratching my head as to what happened with Waterford, but there's still lots of potential there. But I wonder, like, what happens in the off season now if they do change manager or Liam Cattle parts ways. What are your thoughts on Waterford then? And depending on who takes over, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, and like you hear different sort of things coming out. You know the way rumor mills go once a team starts to tailspin a small bit. And do you know what? For the most part, over the last 2.5 years, Waterford have been doing nothing except going on an upward trajectory. They've had injuries and different things, lose the odd game here and there. But in general, it's felt fairly smooth upwards. They have a bad 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden it feels like, everything has gone to hell in a handcart, and you hear about, they were training 10 days in a row before the, whatever game, the last couple of games or whatever, and you wonder, well, how much of this can be true? And you just never really know is the thing, because it's not like one of the players is going to come on here and talk about it. But I do think Waterford are next in the list there, and, in many ways, I still think that they'd beat Wexford. I think that they'd beat Kilkenny in Championship. They've done that in recent times, but they're gone, and their form has just kind of done it. Like, look at how much they absolutely hammered Wexford in the league semi-final.
Yeah.
But still, they're gone out of the Championship, so what can you do?
Have we ever had a Championship like this, or a year like this so far? When you look at it, like, Limerick were, poor throughout the league. Clare were decent throughout the league, but they've really stepped up. At different stages, Galway were poor in the league. Cork looked like after the league semi-final that Cork were really coming. Then they lose 2 games, and then they turn it around. Kilkenny beat Dublin, and then they're beaten by Wexford, so you don't know where they are. Wexford draw Westmeath, and then they beat Kilkenny. They draw with Galway, but they draw with Westmeath, and then they beat Kilkenny. Waterford win the league, looked like the second best team in the country, next best to Limerick. And you said they had a bad 3 weeks. They had an absolutely atrocious couple of weeks, and they're gone out of the Championship. Tipperary don't win a championship game, but yet can put it up to Limerick for 60 minutes. Dublin can beat Wexford, but not get a result against anybody else of consequence in Leinster, and they're gone as well. Like, it's mad. And I was only thinking about this the other day. I remember you basically saying on the show about 3 or 4 weeks ago, sure, Dublin are true. Dublin are out. It's gas. Like, it's just, this season is particularly bizarre so far.
Yeah, and ML89 says the last 2 league champions have both gone out of the Championship without a whimper. Galway last year and Waterford this year. League is league and all that, as they say. So I'm going to bring up the table once more and see, do you agree with how I've finished off the table here?
Oh, someone one of the lads that commented in there, you probably get it up. He had Westmeath ahead of Tipperary. I think he had Westmeath at 9 and Tipperary at 10. Yeah, go man.
Go crack on. Just banning you from the page now.
Tip Dublin. Well, listen, I'd still have Tipperary ahead of Dublin, definitely. Yeah, you'd still have Dublin ahead of Westmeath. Oh yeah, Laois are lucky to be 11 if they are 11 at all. I'd probably have Antrim ahead of Laois at the moment. Basically all we're basing it on is that Laois beat Antrim in their Division 1B league game, and their form has totally nosedived thereafter, apart from the Dublin game. Whereas Antrim have been very good throughout the McDonagh, and their only loss came. They were very good against Offaly in that relegation game. Their only loss came against the Kerry team in the last round, where they were already through to the final.
That's true, but you'd have to say that Laois relegated them last year, had huge injury issues, and very close to beating Dublin the first day out. I know they lost to Westmeath and shipped a fairly heavy scoreline, but like, can you ignore the fact that they did relegate Antrim last year?
But they're relegated themselves now going into 2023. Like, so we're putting a Joe McDonagh team ahead of. Well, that's not to say Antrim aren't definitely a Liam McCarthy team yet, but I just think, aside from saving their bacon in that relegation match last year and saving their Division 1 bacon against Westmeath and beating Antrim this year, like they've shown they just have, to me, they haven't shown enough, been honest with you. And I know they were missing a lot of players or whatever. You wouldn't be 100% sure that their manager is still going to be there next year. So I'm not so sure. I'd have Laois at 12, yeah, been honest.
Okay, I flipped them around and then put Kerry in there as well, because we're going to see Kerry in an All-Ireland preliminary quarter-final. Who knows, maybe in the Munster Championship next year if they can win their next 2 matches. Isn't that right?
Good man.
Yeah. Grotto go crack on. Westmeath got table points in the championship and are not depending on the results of the Joe McDonagh to stay in the Liam McCarthy Cup. That's true. So that's our Hurling Power Rankings. Keep your comments coming in and let us know what you think. We always love to debate these things with you. Are we going to talk? Go back into the Tailteann Cup? I think we will. We watch. Yeah, we watched.
We saw a lot of it over the weekend. I was at Offaly and Wicklow, which we'll probably just fly into here now, pretty quickly. Kind of had high enough hopes for Wicklow coming into this. I know they had a few injuries, a couple of players missing. Andy Maher was missing. He got injured after the Meath game. And Nicky Devereux had a calf injury coming into the game and tried the warm-up and wasn't able to play. But I after beating Laois and after beating Waterford pretty comprehensively, I probably thought we'd see a bit more from Wicklow here. But it's fairly professional from Offaly throughout. They had the wind at their backs. They were 4 points to 1 up early on, despite being probably a bit wasteful themselves. And then Patrick O'Keefe, the Wicklow fullback, was black carded really harshly in my view, to be honest with you, because it didn't look like an intentional pull down or an intentional trip. Offaly win the next 10 minutes, 4 points to 1. They're 9-3 up at half time and kind of in complete control. And Patrick O'Keefe was on Niall McNamee at the time, and Niall McNamee had a little scoring burst during the 10 minutes where he was off the pitch that kind of put Offaly ahead, and they never really looked back. Wicklow hit the first 2 of the second half and didn't hit their first goal from play until the 37 minutes through Mark Kenny. But then kind of Offaly were able to just kind of, a couple of handy enough scores not against the run of play, but just to keep things ticking over. Always had them at arm's length. I think Wicklow got it back to 6, and Kevin Quinn had a good goal chance, and he took a very good shot, to be fair. Paddy Donegan just got down low to his right. You can't really ask for much more from the forward. Put it low to the corner. Keeper got down and saved it. There would have only been 3 in it. That was while Cian Donoghue was off the pitch with a black card. And funny enough, the goal chance came about because Lee Pearson pulled up with what looked like a hamstring injury, and then you have the picture.
This whole thing.
Yeah, like he was down for about 2 or 2.5 minutes, and it's just like, do you know what it reminded me of? And I said it in the press box. You know when Homer tries to jump Springfield Gorge, and the ambulance come and they put him on the gurney, and the gurney just falls, and he keeps and he keeps hitting his head. I was just sure that he was going to be dropped and he was going to fall, and it was just going to be an absolute disaster. But whether it was by design or not, Pearson being down and been carried off with one leg on the ground probably killed about 2.5 minutes of Cian Donoghue's black card. Whether that was by design or not, I'm not so sure. But Offaly, who had a couple of really good performances, thought Johnny Maloney at centre back was brilliant. Thundered forward, got a couple of big turnovers, and Offaly kind of coasted to victory by 8 points in the end. And having had 2 really disastrous results, been beaten by Cork in that Division 2 kind of relegation game, going down to Division 3, been shocked by Wexford. They've kind of turned things around really well. Beat Wexford a point last week in Enniscorthy, got a good result here. Have New York at the weekend, will be fancy to get to a semi-final. They've turned things around well. When I was just saying in my report this morning in the paper, easy enough wave the white flag if that was your kind of disposition, and just say, sure, listen, we're in Division 3 next year. We're knocked out with Leinster. We're after missing an opportunity to play the Dubs on home soil. But they've turned it around nicely, in fairness, and I'm glad for that, because the last thing you want is a team going out with a whimper. And it's a good sign. It's a good sign in management and a good sign in the mentality of the players. How seriously they look like they're taking this competition.
Yeah, I watched this game as well, and the big thing that stood out was Wicklow not scoring from play at all in the first half. And I think it was Mark Kenny scored 2 points in the space of about 5 or 6 minutes for Wicklow early in the second half from play. And that was it for the entire game. So that's not really sustainable if you're going to put up a challenge. I thought Offaly were pretty efficient in the second half. Like, they had 12 shots in the second half and scored 9 of them. And different lads were popping up. I have to say that Lee Pearson thing, I'm just going to bring it up once more. When I saw it happen, I mean, they're all grabbing. Nobody's really taking the bull by the horns here, as far as I can see. one of the physios has a foot, another physio has him in a headlock. And then a lad who looks a small bit like Tony Kelly seems to be trying to do the most of the work in the middle there. It really was quite a comical scene. I couldn't help but take a picture of it at the time. But Niall McNamee, like you said, he had a couple of misses early on, got his flow. His link up with Rory McNamee, who was playing centre forward and kind of dropped deep at times during the game, I thought was really good. And over the course of the game, there was 5 different players from the under-20 All-Ireland winning team last year who appeared on the field. Cormac Egan, I think he has an injury at the moment. That's the reason that he's not featured. So, like, very quickly, John Mahan is working these players into the team.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the Tailteann Cup should be doing for a team. Often you have guys, they want to blood at senior level. Some of them were blooded throughout the league. I think Jack Bryant, who was the under-20 player of the year last year, missed most of the league. He was back in, still looks a bit rusty and probably not match fit, but still kicked 2 good points yesterday, even though he wasn't maybe at his best. Morgan Tynan, another under-20, came on and played well. Lee Pearson was decent until he went off. So good to see all those guys coming in there, and like, sure, it's invaluable to be blooding lads and getting championship football into lads for down the line. You won't see the benefits of it right away, but in the next couple of years, you definitely will. So very good from our point of view. Tailteann Cup is absolutely made for a team like Offaly, who are probably setting foundations for further down the road and trying to get in a load of these successful under-20 players. So yeah, so far so good, you'd have to say. Just on the Wicklow boys as well, obviously Gary Duffy and Alan Costello only took over in early March when Colin Kelly departed. And I just asked Gary yesterday if they were keen to stay on, and I just said, he said, I'm not going to lie, it was difficult. We came into I'd never been part of an inter-county senior side, so we were trying to use this year as a learning curve. We definitely had that. That's up to the county board whether we stay on, but we'd like to stay on. As long as that core group, we have a core group of 12 or 15 lads, if they stick together and we can add quality as well, whoever is over them, hopefully they will get out of Division 4 next year. So, like, good championship win over Laois, good comprehensive defeat of Waterford, which they probably should be beating Waterford by that much. So, like, they've definitely done themselves no harm. And I'd be very surprised if they're not managing Wicklow next year, because they anything but nosedived when they came in. They brought the graph up, if anything.
And I suppose I'm going to have to ban Flash from the page now as well. Do Tipperary have a handball or rounders team that Shane can follow for the summer? The cheeky of Flash. Absolute cheeky. I thought you had my back. I'm going to go through some of the other Tailteann Cup results here.
Just on Flash, Shane, there's a couple of comments coming in last Thursday. The Flash just will take a cut at anybody at a given time. Not afraid to comment, Flash, and don't worry, we appreciate it because we like a good cut ourselves.
We do indeed. So the other results, and we'll touch on different ones just after this. Sligo 3-15, London 2-16. That was a real high-scoring game. Do you know, actually, I know this is kind of very much by the by, but Michael Maher's London accent, like he's the manager of London. It was brilliant to just hear such a thick London accent talking in full GAA regalia. It's sort of the mishmash of the two things worked brilliantly, but a really high scoring game there in Sligo. They're going to go ahead and face Leitrim in the next round. Longford lost at home to Fermanagh, 12 points to 112. Leitrim beat Antrim, and as we said already, Enda McGinley has stepped down as Antrim manager, 214 to 112 there. Cavan put up 24 points on Down's 115. Down have been fairly shocking this year, and obviously we know a lot of players aren't involved. Westmeath beat Laois in Port Laois 113 to 13. And I watched Tipperary's exit from the championship. They went up to Carlow, got a goal, not a girl, early doors. Yeah, I don't know where that came out of. Nice finish from Martin Doyle early on. But Carlow took over as the game went on, scored 7 out of 8 points, I think, in a row in the second half. Very much good value. I mean, Liam McGrath had a good chance to score a goal late in the game to bring Tip back within one, but flashed it over the bar. Other than that, Carlow just looked a well-organised team, broke on Tipperary at different times. Some good scores in the forward line. Dara Foley only knocked over a free as far as I remember, but he was a good target man inside, and a high ball break off him led to a goal from Niall Hickey from midfield. Jamie Clark burst forward for a couple of points from midfield. I also thought Conor Crowley, Colm Hulton, they did themselves no harm, and Owen Root with a couple of bombs from distance. Actually, Ross Dunphy, he came on early in the game and popped up with a couple of points. They had a lot of lads who I thought played really, really well. Dublin's Fair City, Tipper gone to the Dogs this year. By God, lads, you won't give me a second, will you?
There won't be any signing on the Thursday show now. You'll be gone into hiding again. This is more of a surprise than a shock. Carlow beating Tipperary.
Yeah, I wouldn't see it as a shock. Tip hammered them in the league, but it was a late scoring burst after a red card that turned it from like what would have been a 4 or 5 point loss into an 11-point loss. And Kevin Fahey, I think, got 1-1 during injury time. And you know yourself, that can blow a scoreline and change how things look.
It's good to have, it's good to have Dublin's Fair City back. Always a man that was quick to have a go at my love of wrestling. So if I can wangle in a wrestling reference in the next couple of minutes, I will try Dublin's Fair City. But I think this was a surprise, not a shock. And this is, to me, that sort of result is exactly what the Tailteann Cup is about. And teams are going into games. Carlow would have went in and really fancied this game. No more than Tipperary would have fancied beating Carlow. And that's basically the joys of the Tailteann Cup, is that, you know, it's not some massive upset. You're not going in, you know, long odds against going into a game. You're going in with plenty of hope. You're traveling to a game or hosting a team thinking that you can beat them. They're thinking that they can beat you. And that's the perfect scenario for it, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to become another Joe McDonagh Cup, which is a brilliant competition. I don't think, like, Antrim are building up to a final at Oak Park this weekend. And I have a feeling they're absolutely gunning for it, same as Kerry. And Carlow are raging that they missed out. Awfully, you're raging that you missed out on the final this year. No more than Michael Fennelly. You'd love to be there, wouldn't you?
Yeah, sure. It's playing a game in Croke Park, like playing a final, and then you have a preliminary game after, and the chance of getting back into the Leinster Championship. Sure, it's absolutely huge. There's no point in saying any different. Yeah, exactly. The one worry, I suppose, it's like anything when you introduce tiers is, do the teams just stay at that level? How do you get the opportunity for growth or for teams to really get better, I suppose? If you do win the Tailteann Cup, have you progressed enough? What are the avenues to make you better, I suppose, so that when you do go up, that you're going to be as competitive as you were at a lower grade? But that's probably a bigger debate, I should say.
Dublin's Fair City says, nice jersey all the same. Shano brings back memories of Brian Mullins dishing out summary justice on Meath men. Reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you get 15% off any of the jerseys there. They're absolutely class jerseys. Like that Derry one there, this little sweet Dublin number here as well. There's lots of great jerseys there.
How many points do you think would be spilled over this, if you're wearing this now? Today, if you're wearing it last night or anywhere up around Swatcher or Marafelt or any of these places, I'd say you do well keep it clean. This is an absolute beauty. To me now, this is probably nearly the nicest of them all, I'd say.
Yeah, it'll be a statistical improbability to keep a jersey like that clean on a night in the beer up in Derry over the last couple of days. Is there any game in particular that you want to touch on? Maybe Fermanagh beating Longford. I mean, that was a very good performance there and a great finish from Ultan Kelm for the goal. I mean, what an unusual name, Ultan Kelm.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he's been dogged by injury. Don't think he played. He was obviously out playing AFL, but has had awful troubles with his hips. So I think that kind of journey down under has finished up for the moment. But with this recurrent hip injury, but he had a bit of a dream return. Still not sure if he looked like he was 100% fit, but he got the goal that was basically the difference maker there. So they're in the hat again. They're playing Cavan, I think, the next day. And as I said earlier, they'll half fancy that, which is the beauty of it all, really. But that's a big result for them. Disappointing for Billy O'Loughlin in Longford. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens there, whether he's involved for a second year or not.
Yeah, absolutely there. And I suppose Westmeath and Laois, they both finished with 14 men each. Kevin Maguire was sent off. There's talk of an appeal there relating to the video footage. Danny Bulger had a great penalty save from John Heslin. Jeez, he gambled early and still had to react and get the hand up high to stop Heslin's shot. Great goal by Sam McCartan, actually. Won a kick-out, an opposition kick-out, sold forward and finished low. I thought that was excellent. I was wondering with Laois, late on, Owen Lowry, he had what I thought was a bit of a goal chance, flashed it over the bar, and from then on it just seemed that Westmeath did just enough. There was a late ball lobbed into the square at the very end where Laois were hoping to get a bit of a break, but didn't transpire that way for them. A couple of other results that we haven't looked at just yet. In the Leinster ladies final, Dublin beat Meath 1-7-1-5, and in the Munster ladies senior football championship final, Cork 2-11, Kerry 1-9. Also the Ulster minor football championship final, Tyrone's I suppose their production line of talent continues. 4-8 to 16 points win over Derry. Owen McElhorn finished with 2-2 and was very much the main man there. We have to finish up with a final hurling thing. Actually, sorry, first off, we might as well talk about the All-Ireland Minor Hurling Championship quarter-final. Laois 2-14, Galway 23. And Galway really impressed against Clare last time out. So good performance from Laois there. Obviously, you know them well enough, having seen them in the Leinster final against Tyrone and Offaly. But Galway are humming along nicely.
Yeah, like they're obviously not playing any provincial campaign, so at least they have 2 games in their road test going into the All-Ireland semi-finals. They definitely didn't get it all their own way at the weekend. From a Leinster point of view, I would think the form looks pretty strong of Offaly's Leinster win now, given that, Laois really put it up to Galway the other day. Ger Quinlan, who was kept quiet in that Leinster final against Offaly, he was just brilliant at the edge of the square the other day. It was a one-man kind of wrecking ball at different stages there. I think he ended up at 1-4 or 1-5. Then on the Galway point of view, Aaron Nyland, obviously younger brother of Evan, who's in with the seniors, just very, very good. I think it was during lockdown, was it, where his various skills and flicks and tricks kind of came to national attention, and it probably won't be too long before he comes to national attention as a senior player, I'd imagine, over the next 3 or 4 years. But Galway definitely looking in a strong position there. I just on the Leinster ladies football final, great to see this played in Croke Park. Great to see the Dubs ladies and the men's footballers as well wearing the support for Drummo shirt as well. Obviously one of your own clubmates, Sean Drummond. But just on the ladies final, I think it was 1-7 to 1-5. Dublin were up a point with about 70 seconds left, and it's amazing having experienced that All-Ireland final heartache last year and probably not knowing much about Meath at that time. Vicky Wall goes to make a run, and one of the Dublin players just stands in her way, completely stands in her way. Vicky flattens her, Vicky falls to the ground, Vicky gets a yellow card, and it was just amazing. They know her now. They'll do anything to stop her now. And there's a bit of cynicism there as well, which is, listen, Dublin were probably caught in the hop in that Ireland final last year. And it definitely looks like they've done their homework. And like, that was far from an epic. It was 1-7 to 1-5. I think Dublin missed a couple of goal chances. But that rivalry's bubbling over nicely. They're going to meet again at some stage, be it in an All-Ireland quarter-final, semi-final, or a final again. And like, that has the potential to really kind of light up ladies football, I'd say, over next year, and maybe potentially replace the men's rivalry, which has just disappeared off the radar completely. Maybe Dublin and Meath can write a load of, add a load of chapters to last year's final, and have that kind of neighbourly rivalry that could really explode over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and look, I mean, cynicism is the price of entry if you want to be a top team here. So, Meath, they've got to the top already. They know what it takes if they want to get back there again. Look at Limerick, look at Dublin, look at Kerry. We talked about their fouling compared with Limerick's in the Munster football final over the weekend. That is just the price of entry. Double Fair City said, is this the start of the show or the end? I was out last night and my head's all over the shop. Well, we're towards the end, and we're going to finish up with an updated list of our top 5 hurlers in Ireland. So we haven't done this for a while. Let's have a little look at what it was the last time. We had Cian Lynch number 1, Tony Kelly number 2, Hegarty number 3, Barron 4, and Sean Finn 5. It's probably changed a little bit, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. With due respect to Jamie Barron, it's going to be very difficult to have him in the top 5 now, you'd have to say. Tony Kelly's form has gone up. Cian Lynch played what, 1 full match, and there's question marks about how much he's going to feature. He's not going to feature in Munster again, so whether he's still number 1 or not is in question too. I think Gerard Hegarty's form while on the pitch has been brilliant. Discipline probably question mark a small bit, or just the fact that he even got a red card. Sean Finn was taken for 3 points from play by Tony Kelly when they played them the last time out, but he's been pretty good too. I suppose you have to look at who comes out. Dermot Burns is a good one. He definitely has to come in, I would say. Are there any other lads that you can think of that really deserve to come into that mix?
I'd say Aaron Gallan now might be. Yeah, I think Aaron Gallan.
Are we gonna have Tony Kelly and 4 Limerick lads?
It's looking that way, isn't it?
There's a serious potential for it anyway.
Well, look, I think because of the way the injuries are at the moment, and we don't know how he'll be for the rest of the year, I think we have to put Tony Kelly at number 1.
Yeah, like he was good, I'd say, in the first 2 games. the game against Limerick, he took
Number
us
1 and
far.
2.
Yeah. I tell you, who was it picked their dream 7 aside? One of the Clare players a couple of years ago, and he just had 7 Tony Kellys.
Yeah, hard to debate. Jeez, if you could find 7 of them, you'd be happy enough, wouldn't you?
But
Conor Gilligan earlier was talking about having 2 Brendan Rodgers. We've got 2 Tony Kellys.
Yeah, just like to do what Tony Kelly did against the best team in the country, and like he was on Dermot Burns at a couple of different stages. One of those great points he got down the shed sideline, shall we say, was like Burns was up behind him, right up on top of him, and he's still able to score. So I have no issue with Tony Kelly, number 1. Does Cian Lynch remain in the top 5 here?
Well, like, there's no doubt that when fit, we had him at number 1 for a reason. So he's without question in the top 5. I see Fergus Butler here saying Lahan on current form. I think we need to see a small bit more talent-wise. He's up there with some of the best hurlers in the country, but I'm not sure if we can have him in the top 5 just yet. I see Shane O'Donnell being mentioned, Rory Hayes. I see Shane O'Donnell being mentioned a couple of times, yeah, as I was saying. Dermot Burns has been mentioned. Like, how far up? Look, we'll come back to Cian Lynch in a minute. How far up here are we talking with Dermot Burns or with Aaron Gillan? I'm going to put Groat Hegarty in at number 2, by the way. He's just been sensational through the Munster Championship.
Thought he was brilliant against Tipshane, particularly at the end. He scored 4 points against Clare while he was on the pitch, including that lovely kind of faded effort around from 70 yards, and he just strikes the ball ridiculously easy. I'd have no problem having him there. I suppose you have to look at how far down Burns. Yeah, Dermot Burns.
What do you make of this comment, by the way, from Liam Lennon? Do you want to read it out?
Yeah, would have argued for Owen Cody if Kilkenny weren't just belting ball over his head. Yeah, when he's been on the ball, he's been brilliant. Like against Galway, he was absolutely outstanding. Is there any Galway player that comes into the mix? Does Conor Whelan come into the conversation?
Well, I think he's always in our conversation in there, but it's hard to kind of nail him down for that top one when in the top 5, because Galway probably aren't getting enough ball into him. He's not been able to do quite the amount of damage that it seems that he definitely can do huge damage, but maybe he's not getting quite enough ball to be getting that regular supply of goals that he's probably capable of.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I'd agree with you there. Another, like from a Wexford point of view, he probably doesn't come into the top 5, but Damien Rex has been outstanding this year. Lee Chin just showed how important he is to the Wexford cause against Kilkenny as well. When he was just like, he was everywhere. Everything that was good about Wexford, Chin was probably involved in it. He probably hasn't played enough this year or to that level, I'd say, to be in the top 5.
Thinking the same, yeah.
Yeah, Dublin players. Probably, Donald Burke is maybe one of the few that you could talk about. Don't think his form was at the level where he's coming into the top 5. Tipperary obviously gone as well. Noel McGrath's form was brilliant against Limerick in particular. He was class. Against Waterford the first day, he was man of the match in a lot of quarters, despite being on the losing team. And he didn't exactly do too much wrong the last day against Cork either, but don't think he's coming into that top 5 conversation. Yeah, the Clare lads, Peter Duggan's been brilliant. Again, I don't think he come into the top 5. O'Donnell probably wouldn't have him in the top 5.
John
either.
Conlon.
They're probably hovering. There's probably a lot of players hovering. Rory Hayes is right on the borderline, I'd say. Right on the borderline. Probably the closest of the 3 or 4 Clare lads that we've mentioned there outside of Kelly to make it, I'd say.
Kyle Hayes.
Hasn't showed it. Yeah, well, it's a funny one.
Well, you see, yeah, again, it's the same as the Hurling Power Rankings. There's no absolute formula here. You kind of have to go on what they've done before, what you think they can do. There's a lot of different things at play here. The team they're in, will that allow them to show the full of themselves in the way that Conor Whelan and Owen Cody maybe aren't showing the entire full of themselves? Maybe Jake Morris in a different team would go to town. So there's a lot at play here. It's very difficult to nail it down. It's very subjective.
I don't think Hayes is in the top 5 as a forward. I'd put it to you that way. I think he offers a lot more as a wing back. That's like his versatility would probably cost him, I'd say, in this 5. But I just don't think he's a natural. Don't think he's a natural full forward. That's not to say he can't do a load of damage. I just don't think he's natural. Are we putting should we be? Cian Lynch has to stay in the top 5. It's just a matter of where he's going to be, I would say.
It's just where. Can you hear me there, Michael?
Yeah, I can hear you again. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, just dropped my end for a second there. You were saying Cian Lynch is still top 5?
Well, like, I know he hasn't played that much in recent weeks, but he's a 2-time hurler of the year. Was very good against Cork. Like, are we taking him out just because he's injured at the moment? He will feature this year, I'd imagine, but it just kind of, I don't know. Does he come down to the bottom end of the top 5 if he's in it, or are we still saying, listen, Cian Lynch when he's 100% fit is class? He should still be number 3 or thereabouts.
Well, I suppose we dropped Tony Kelly away from number 1 a while back because of stuff like ankle injury and things like that. You could argue that he never dropped from being the number 1 hurler in the country, except for the way things conspired with his team maybe not overall being as good as Limerick's, him not having the same amount of opportunities. I mean, if you put them side by side on the same team, who would be better, Tony Kelly or Cian Lynch? It would be very, very hard to call, wouldn't it?
That's tough. That's a tough question. Yeah, that's a tough question. Yeah. And the beauty of that as well is that they are 2 different types of players. Kelly, I'd say Kelly on that Clare team, not that he knows he has to score, but there's more of that scoring burden on him. Whereas Lynch, there's less of a scoring burden on him. He can just be a creator and a killer creatively, rather than Kelly. I think feels he has to take on that mantle a lot of the time. I'd probably still have Cian Lynch in at 3, Shane, if I'm honest with you. I don't think we should totally forget about him.
No. I'd agree. I'd put him at 3, but I think a view that he can go back to number 1 when he's fit and he gets a couple of games under his belt. So I'm sure nobody from Limerick will take a fit of the vapors at that. Would you put... I'm starting to think that, before I said, will Aaron Gillane take that next step to become one of the elite forwards in Ireland? I think he's kind of getting to that stage now where, like a few of the other Limerick hurlers, you almost feel like you need to have a special plan for him. Now, ultimately, you can't plan especially for all of these guys. But in terms of like inside forward, the threat he carries, I just think he has to be in the top 5 now at this stage. And arguably he's the best inside forward. And maybe Desi Hutchinson should be talking about here. Like Waterford were battered against Clare in the final round and he scored 1-6 from play. So, you can't ignore what he's doing. He scored a goal against Tip as well. Won that Club All-Ireland. Was huge for Ballygunner.
5 points against Limerick as well, yeah. I tell you something there, and it's a fair point you make. He played particularly well in a team that was not functioning at all.
This is the thing. Dublin's Fair City says Tony Kelly, Gerard Hegarty, Tim O'Mahony, Conor Whelan, and Kyle Hayes. And then I think for you, he goes at top 5 with Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, Hacksaw, Jim Duggan. How's that, Verney, lad?
I like that. If I was adding probably 2 more, we're looking at 90s vintage there. I'd probably throw in the Texas Tornado and maybe who are we looking at? Psycho Sid maybe as well. Good man, Dublin's Fair City. It's good to see that you're getting in on it this morning, even though you have a sick head.
I'd be a big fan of the tag teams back from the 90s, like the natural disasters, Earthquake and Typhoon. The 2 of them about 30 stone each. We had the Rockets, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty.
The Rockers, the Rockers. And then Shawn Michaels famously super kicked Marty Jannetty through the barbershop window. That's how they split up. That's how you do it.
Who could forget? Gronogo Grakon says, if Rory Hayes does a good job in Aaron Gillane on Sunday, will that put him in the top 5? Well, will he be marking him? Will Conor Cleary, because he's very strong in the air, will he be put on him? But then Rory Hayes is probably better across the turf, where Gillane is also very good. And that's the dual threat that Gillane poses. He's a threat both in the air and on the ground because of that beautiful sidestep he has. Flash, I'm going to make it easier for myself. I do a top 10 instead.
Flash, come on.
It's a bit windy, Flash. That's windy. Tony Kelly, Aaron Gillane, Cian Lynch, Jimmy Burns, Gerard Hegarty, Sean Finn, Shane O'Donnell, Barry Nash. He's also added in Peter Duggan and Rory Hayes. Dublin Fair City enjoys the Texas Tornado. Flash, John Cena, The Rock, Stone Cold, Bret Hart. They're the goats for me. So we still haven't fully settled on this top 5. As ever, when we're doing any of these lists, we get sidetracked and we start talking about other things like wrestling. So Cian Lynch,
I'm gonna I think Dermot Burns and Aaron Gillane should complete the top 5. And I think the worrying thing from the Chase and Pack's point of view is obviously Lynch isn't playing at the moment, but the worrying thing from the Chase and Pack's point of view is how many Limerick players are in form. Gerard Hegarty's playing as good as he did in 2020. Aaron Gillane, to me, is playing the best hurling of his career. Dermot Burns is playing the best hurling of his career. Sean Finn is still playing well, but maybe just not maybe as well as he was at different stages last year. Barry Nash, 100% Liam, totally agree with you. Barry Nash is like the ultimate cornerback at the moment. And it's funny because I asked Sean Finn about that, and he said, well, Barry Nash kind of plays that floater kind of cornerback, and he plays it so well. He's so comfortable on the ball, and he brings so much energy to it and can put a score over. And that's worrying from the Chasing Pack's point of view, just how many lads are playing well. You'd have to say the two Patrick Swell lads, Burns and Gallan, are playing the best hurling that they've ever played. And Hegarty is back at 2020 levels. So that's that is a worrying thing for the Chasing Pack, without a doubt.
So actually, now that you say it, 3 of the top 5, number 3, 4, and 5 here, are all from Patrick Swell.
Yeah, sure. Listen, and that's something that we must put to Kieran on Thursday. Like, it's phenomenal, and I'd love to know at what stages. They're all pretty much a similar age as well. I don't know that they dominate underage hurling coming up, whether they well did or not. But when you have 3 players like that on any team, it's outstanding. They're all. Limerick probably do still need Keane Lynch back, but they have a lot of players that are just playing out of their skin at the moment. And there's a couple of lads unlucky. Rory Hayes is unlucky. Sean Finn is probably a bit unlucky as well. Rory Hayes probably in a better form, you would say, maybe. O'Donnell potentially unlucky as well. But like, that says a lot. That said, like, we don't maybe talk too much about the Limerick squad, but their 15 is outstanding on a given day. It's absolutely outstanding. And listen, there's a fair chance that Tom Morrissey would probably be in that top 5 by the end of the year, because that's just the way he operates, and he just gets better as the championship goes on as well.
Yeah, I had him as my hurler of the year in 2020. Yeah, he does do that. He kind of picks up as the season goes on. Killian Doyle, second highest scorer in the championship, says SSRI. Yeah, very fair comment there. Flash, Mike Casey deserves an honourable mention. Came back in after nearly 3 years there at a championship game and hasn't missed a single beat. Dublin's Fair City. I forgot Burns and Gallan. That list is pretty much spot on, to be fair. Yeah, I mean, we're absolutely open to other suggestions. You might feel that Leinster has been underserviced here. It's basically 2 counties. There's probably a pretty small mileage, I suppose, between all those players that we've named in the top 5 there. You could probably drive an hour or less between all of their houses. Diarmuid O'Keefe has obviously been playing well for Wexford. You mentioned Lee Chin. Owen Cody, I suppose, has been good for Kilkenny. Conor Whelan, you mentioned. I mean, there's not that many players outside of that other than Desi Hutchinson. I think he's probably the one real player that you could say, especially because he's playing well in a team that's not going well at all. Yeah, he's probably the one who's most unlucky. And I think if Austin Gleeson, if the red card hadn't happened, and maybe the final game against Clare, if they weren't beaten so heavily, he'd probably be in the conversation, because despite the red cards, he was actually playing brilliantly.
Yeah, no, he was playing great stuff, in fairness. When he was on the pitch, he was outstanding. You'd have to say. And in fairness to Desi, he's probably a bit unlucky there. Just probably the fact that his championship is over now as well. It's funny when you say that about those guys. Like, I think Tony Kelly's 28. The youngest is probably, like, they're all between, say, 25 and 28. And that's kind of, maybe that's a sign of modern hurling as well, of where lads start. I do think lads are starting to hit their peak a little bit earlier. I would have said nearly it was even early 30s before. If you looked at the hurler of the years, probably TJ, Shamie Callanan, and a few more, and even Hoggy a couple of years ago, they were hitting their peak, or they're very, very best at 31 or 32. Then you probably go to the other side of it, whereas all these guys are at their peak in mid to late 20s, and that's probably a frightening. Very well said by Liam there. Joseph Cooney's been unbelievable. Tom Annan's been very good, but Cooney has been absolutely lighting it up at both ends of the field for Galway, and I think that's exciting from a Galway point of view, that while they maybe don't have anybody to go into the top 5 at the moment, they have a lot of guys hovering. Whelan is hovering, Pádraig Mannion is hovering, Tom Annett is hovering, Joseph Cooney is hovering. You need a lot of guys, and that's why I say what's promising from a Clare point of view, that they have Conlon, Hayes, O'Donnell, Duggan. They have a lot of guys that are playing well, that are in the conversation. Limerick have a lot of lads that are in the 5, but a lot of other teams have a lot of guys that are in that conversation. You see how it moves as the season goes. So you need 7 or 8 lads in really, really good form, and all the counties that we're saying have a really realistic chance of winning the All-Ireland all have that at the moment.
One final thing then, the GOAT of the week, and I think you could look at Shane Walsh with Galway. He was brilliant. Brendan Rodgers, I think, is someone that we can't ignore. Conor Callahan was very good. Killian Spillane was very good. Those lads in Tailteann Cup were very good. I'm going to give it to Brendan Rodgers. I know you're wearing the colours, but I just thought he was brilliant.
Yeah, he was outstanding, sure. When was the last time a fullback has had that much impact at both ends of the pitch. And as we said, up there with the best dual players in the land, playing at opposite ends of the field in both codes. So no, I'd be happy enough to give it to Brendan Rodgers as well. I saw Conor Glass sending out a tweet around 4 or 5 in the morning. I'd say that was a general team. They're great times, and I'm sure they're enjoying them. So Brendan Rodgers, more than deserved, I think, the goal of the week from both of us this week.
Yeah, and just a reminder, one final time, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you'll get 15% off. They really are absolutely brilliant jerseys. Michael, as ever, it's been a pleasure, and we'll chat to you again later in the week.
Good stuff, Shane. Cheers.